3 minutes after 10 is the time. In many ways, the most important story to note today is the 7th anniversary of the Grenfell Tower tragedy. We will be speaking to people involved then and still involved now in that sorry night anniversary. So rest assured, we'll be marking that moment properly today. But we'll begin with something a little bit. Well, I was going to say a little bit left field. I'm not sure it is. There's quite a lot going on in the context of Brexit. There is a lot of disillusionment, perhaps is the right word, with Keir Starmer after it was really relegated almost to an afterthought in yesterday's manifesto reveal. But do you know, at the same time, there's an indication of perhaps why it has been relegated to almost afterthought status in today's Daily Mail, which I appreciate. It's not the influence that it used to be, but I think it's still pretty much the house journal for the terminally deluded and bilious. And they managed to get almost a half-page story under the headline, "Surprise, now he says all of Boris's Brexit deal is up for negotiation." So Keir Starmer has managed to be simultaneously pilloried for not being strong on the need to revisit Brexit and for suggesting that he is going to revisit Brexit. I think that's worth pausing for a moment, isn't it? We live in very strange times, obviously, and I'm afraid they're going to stay strange for a while, even if the expected result of the general election arrives. But you have the leader of the opposition, a man riding extremely high in the opinion polls, being criticised for polar opposite positions. People who are criticising him for both X and Y at the same time. He is being criticised by the right for saying that Brexit is up for negotiation, and he is being criticised by actually right, left. I know it feels like it fits on the Brexit debate, but it doesn't, does it? Of course. So he's being criticised by the Daily Mail, which you could see as the sort of house journal of people who thought that Brexiteer was a positive label to have tattooed across your forehead rather than a mark of eternal shame. And he is being criticised by people who knew and explained the ridiculousness of becoming the first population in history to vote to impose economic sanctions on itself, criticising him for not essentially pledging to revisit it. Sometimes I get on air and I know roughly what I'm going to be talking about, but I don't know the specifics of it. And as I thrash out the specifics, I find myself, I'm taken by surprise by what I'm saying to you. So I hadn't clocked the absurdity of this contradiction. Anyways, it's the essence of Brexit, is that Keir Starmer is now getting it in the neck for promising to revisit Brexit and getting it in the neck for not promising to revisit Brexit from two completely different constituencies, which I think forms a fairly neat foundation stone for elements of the conversation that I'd quite like to have, because it is to the novelist Robert Harris that I would turn your attention next. Harris, of course, perhaps best known for Fatherland, but a writer of immense acumen and I think a former political editor of the Sunday Times. And he tweeted last night, "Brexit, the great unmentionable of this election, is really what has done for the Tories. It's infuriated both those who voted to remain, who see it as a colossal self-inflicted disaster, and those who voted leave, who think they were told a pack of lies. Result, annihilation." So the question of whether the imminent Tory annihilation is perhaps all down to Brexit. And that might form the first part of our conversation today, because, inevitably, media who prioritise clicks over actual content are spending far too much time reporting on the fact that Nigel Farage's party has overtaken the Conservatives by 1 point in one poll. It is a moment, absolutely newsworthy, but obviously not on anything like the scale that some people would describe. The point is, of course, that the man who lied longest and loudest about Brexit is in some ways the chief beneficiary, if Robert Harris is right, the chief beneficiary of the damage that Brexit has done to the Conservative Party. So I've got two questions, really, one about the Tories and one about the Labour Party. I think we'll start with the Labour Party, and that question is, has Keir Starmer got it right? Has Keir Starmer got it right? Does the fact that he's been attacked for doing something that he's also being attacked for not doing prove that on this at least, the theory of the Ming vase is absolutely in place. It is such a tricky business that to draw any attention to it whatsoever would be hazardous, would be deleterious, would be a vote loser. I do get frustrated. I'm not going to lie to you. When people like Angela Rayner, you can tell. There were a couple of things last night where she was being party before person, party before herself. You could tell that in her bones she wants to get rid of the 2-child limit on benefits. And quite rightly, Julie Etchingham asked her how she could end up on the other side of the argument from Suella Braverman on something like that. Suella Braverman, of course, untethered completely from reality, but even a stopped clock is right twice a day. And you know that the Labour Party is full of people, including, oddly, including Keir Starmer, who recognise the ridiculousness of what we've done, but think that it is more important to stay quiet. So there's a few bits of Robert Harris's tweet that I find interesting. I think he misses out the people who voted for it and realise that it is a colossal self-inflicted disaster. So the people who are most responsible for the shift in the polling, and the polling is now pretty powerful, although not powerful enough, I don't think, to make it a no-brainer for the Labour Party to go in on this. But if you look at the polling that the Labour Party have, do those of us who think Keir Starmer is wrong not to revivify the Brexit argument, do we have to shut up and sit down? So whatever frustration we may feel, whatever frustration you may feel, the fact that it is all currently going so well, coupled with the fact that he can be attacked simultaneously for both doing and not doing the same thing, as in revisiting the ludicrous arrangements that Boris Johnson and David Frost signed us up for, does that prove that he is actually getting it right? Or is it an act of political cowardice? We'll start with that, and then we may get on to the question of whether or not the biggest hole below the Tory waterline is actually caused by Brexit, and the strange situation that conjures up of the man who lied loudest and longest about Brexit being the beneficiary of Brexit's inevitable destruction of the people charged with delivering it. I mean, if the stakes weren't so high, the irony would be delicious, wouldn't it? But we may move on to that. So I want to begin with that question there. It's Keir Starmer getting it in the neck for not being more robust about the need to revise Brexit, and getting it in the neck for apparently saying that he is going to revise Brexit. Has he actually got the issue correct? Hit the numbers now. You will get through. 0345 6060 973. John in Exeter says the polling suggests he has got it absolutely right. Revisiting Brexit at this point would be the equivalent of tipping TCP onto an open wound for those who are currently considering voting for the Labour Party, but who perhaps voted for Brexit previously and have not voted for Labour in the past. I mean, there comes a point where you wonder whether the prioritisation of achieving power over almost everything else becomes more bad than good, but I don't think we're near that point yet. I kind of just want a form of reassurance, in a sense, that, I mean, the thing is, if you know that it needs to be revisited, then you can probably console yourself with the thought that it needs to be revisited. The inevitability of gravity coming back into play again, of improving our trading relations with our closest geographical trading partners. I mean, the madness, in fact, of making it harder to trade with our nearest trading partners is one for the history books. And yet, the sense from his words that he's not intending to, quotes, reopen old wounds, end quotes, is impossible to ignore. Brexit, says Richard, is for the next election. So that's where we'll go in on this. So start off with Keir Starmer. Has he got this right? And in many ways, the more committed a Remainer you are, the more powerful it is for him, for Starmer, if you agree with what he's doing. I am going to, without even putting my tongue in my cheek, I'm going to describe myself as being 52-48 on this. It's heart versus head stuff, isn't it? Head says, yeah, he's probably got it right. Heart says, oh, for God's sake, the sooner we undo this epochal harm inflicted on us by liars, cheats and chanters, almost all of whom are fleeing the stage before the curtain even comes down, then heart kicks in. So I would say genuinely 52-48. But what do you think? Has he got it right? 0345 6060 973. And if he's got it wrong, why do you think it would be better, given where he stands in the polls, for Keir Starmer to have kind of applied the electrodes to the corpse of Brexit and reanimated the entire shebang? It's coming up to 10:15. The other question that we'll move on to is going to be, and you may actually want to have a crack at both. There's no reason why you shouldn't. But a big fan of Robert Harris, who's both as a journalist and latterly as an author, someone who understands particularly the threat posed by the far right throughout European history. But when he says that it is Brexit that has really done for the Tories, because the people who wanted it feel betrayed, and the people who didn't want it feel furious, I don't know that that's necessarily correct. But it is obviously deeply ironic that the man who lied loudest and longest about Brexit has just overtaken in the polls, or at least the leader, the party has overtaken in the polls, the party of the people who were charged with delivering it and therefore essentially sentenced to inevitable disaster because of the impossibility of delivering the unicorns. It's 10:15. I also wonder, if you're like me and you think he's going to have to grasp this nettle soon, how soon is soon? Was it the Smiths who sang how soon is now? Anyway, how soon is soon? I give it a year, 2 years, and if they haven't done something in this space, you're going to start feeling your patience expire. I don't know, but it's always nice to get stuck into a Brexity phone-in. And I will. Lots of you are asking me to stop saying the B word. It sort of minimises the horror of what's been done. Do you know the people in my inbox, not just applicants for Idiot's Corner, but also people who might otherwise be quite sensible? The people who are always furious when we talk about it are the people who voted for it. I just keep Chris and Celia waiting for a moment longer, because I think that's absolutely fascinating, don't you? The people who get why are you still talking about it? It's over. Could you imagine if it had been a great success? The same people insisting that we never talk about it. It'd be a bit like winning the World Cup in 1966, and by 1967, every England fan in the world would be going, "Stop talking about it! Why are you still going on about it? You won. Why do you want everyone to stop talking?" I mean, that is more illustrative of where you sit than I could ever explain with words. That feeling you've got now, if you voted for it, whenever you hear me talking about it, that feeling you've got there, that's your fault, not mine. It's a bit like when they say if you rub an animal's face in its doings, then it won't do a whoopsie on the carpet again. I don't know whether that's true or not. I've never tried it. But the people who hate me talking about it, it's a bit of a mystery that you're still listening. But the people who hate me talking about it are the people who voted for it and thought it would be brilliant. So how can you be cross with me and not be cross with the people that told you it was going to be brilliant? Anyway, I don't know. But it's Keir Starmer we're talking about today, to start with. Chris is in Chelmsford. Chris, what do you reckon? Has he got it right or wrong?
I think he's got it right on the basis that the most important thing that faces this country is getting the Tories out and stopping the damage they're doing. If we try and re-litigate Brexit, the right-wing media will just seize upon it and turn it into another Brexit election.
And there's no votes in it either, really.
No, not really. I mean, the things in the country that actually affect people, whilst Brexit is a cause, have been transcended by the totality of the problems we have in the country regarding the cost of living and the idiot policies that are coming out. And so, therefore, I think trying to get Labour into power and reset everything onto a better trajectory is a far more important thing to do than re-litigating Brexit.
For how long? For you personally, for Chris in Chelmsford, how long is the moratorium, if you like?
First year of Labour in power, as they start to do work on their growth principles and as they start to expand upon that, that's when the conversation about re-tapping into the European market would become better, because at that point you may also be facing tax rises versus opening doors to Europe, and you could use that as a
growth, an argument for growth. If you want growth, we need growth in order to avoid tax rises, and we can't get growth if we continue to have economic sanctions in place regarding trade with our nearest geographical potential partners. I mean,
exactly. Because you sort of the bleeding obvious will come to light, but when you do it from a basis that we're actually trying to build, right now we're trying to dwindle and move money up. If we can get the country understanding we're trying to build, then I think it's an easier. Sell's not the right word, is it? It's an easier acceptance
proposal.
Of people.
I get it. How hard do you find this? Because you sound quite sanguine about it. Because I'm 52-48, but it's head 52, heart 48. Your ratio sounds a bit different. Your head is much bigger than your heart.
Pretty much. I mean, I've got a boy at university, another about to get, doing his A-levels, trying to look at their future. I have to try and think that their future will be better with a Labour government. And
what would be gained by scaring the horses on this issue at this point? But as you say, Chris, you give them a year. Good luck to your lad with those A-levels. I don't know who finds it more stressful, the students or the parents, to be honest with you. But it'll be over soon. The light at the end of the tunnel is edging ever closer. Thank you, mate. The voter I don't know about, the one that the Daily Mail tries to appeal to, is the one that's flirting with the idea of voting Labour but remains committed to their vote for Brexit. And maybe it's, I don't know, a sign of my own limited social circle. But I don't think that I know anybody like that. I know people who voted for Brexit who now recognise that it was silly and are now intending to vote Labour for the first time in their life, including some family members. But the person who still backs Brexit but is currently flirting with Labour and would be scared off by Starmer going further than he's gone on this issue, despite the fact that not going very far at all is still enough for the Daily Mail to have a swing at him. Oh, what a tangled web we weave. Celia is in Coventry. Celia, what would you like to write? What would you like to say?
Hi, James. In answer to your question,
yes,
my belief is that Starmer has got it 100% right. And this is speaking for a Remainer that is not 100%, it's 1,000,000%
yes.
Remainer. I am from a blended Spanish-British family, and Brexit has been beyond horrible for us.
Yes.
So I would like nothing better than for the UK to rejoin the EU. But the situation is that when it comes to rejoining, why would he do that on the basis that... It
doesn't necessarily have to be rejoin, which I don't think is going to be up to us anyway, but just having a more robust resurrection, if you like, of the issue.
Yes, and I totally get that, but not from his point of view as the leader of a political party in the UK. Okay, because he needs to bring the entire... not the entire, I mean, that's impossible, but he needs to maximize his voting base, okay?
Yeah.
So that is, it's counterproductive, if nothing else. But what he does need to do, in my opinion, is that he does need to make Brexit work. I mean, that's a ridiculous statement. It never will, which is the reason why I say he needs to go back to Europe in 2025, make the best possible deal that he can do with Europe. And then once that is in place, he can then turn around to the population and say, right, that's the best we can get, or we can join the single market.
Yeah, but you can't join the single market. I mean, you know that the four freedoms are indivisible, so you're never going to have freedom of movement of goods unless you have freedom of movement of labour.
Absolutely. But at that point, the dire straits that the UK is in terms of labour, would have hit. I mean, there is a reason why Labour is on the top of the, so far ahead of the Tories. So by that time, giving enough time, I don't know this for certain, but I would think that if the population can see that they've done their best, they've had a few years to train their own, and still there's not enough,
then maybe they could go back to the people with that offer at the next general election.
They can see that, freedom of movement was half the immigrants that there currently is when there is no freedom of movement. So time will make a bit more rational thinking. And not just time, but dare I say it, when those in power are telling you, which is the opposite of what's been happening right now.
Yeah.
I mean, the EU has been
that,
vilified left, right and centre.
Yeah. And you're going to have, I can't say that, but there is a possibility, of course, that we will have some of the key architects of Brexit sitting in the House of Commons, which will actually make it easier to point out how completely those lies of 2016 have been blown to pieces. Well, you give even longer then to Keir Starmer. You're saying it's a second general election issue, and by then, if they've delivered on some of the other areas, and the demographics of this are absolutely crucial to understand the ageing population and the need for labour is going to become almost unignorable or irrefutable. Got an Idiot's Corner for two reasons. Not only is Rob in Idiot's Corner for proving my point about the people who hate us talking about this being the ones who actually voted for it and thought it was going to be brilliant, but he also calls himself Big Rob on WhatsApp, which is, I mean, unless you're 11, mate, in which case you probably should be at school. That's tragic. But anyway, dear O'Brien, shut up. Boring Brexit yet again. And here come your selected callers. Well, my callers are selected, Big Rob, in the sense that we don't just pick up the phone and say, hello, you're live on the radio. But the idea that they're selected solely to portray a certain position, well, that's as daft as you thinking that we should stop talking about something that you thought was going to be brilliant just because it's all turned out to be rubbish. Boring, he writes, on his way, shouting on his way into Idiot's Corner. We will have to clear a big space, though, in Idiot's Corner because it's Big Rob. It's not just any old Rob, it's Big Rob making his way into Idiot's Corner this morning. Jeffrey, is it Big Jeffrey in Richmond or just average size Jeffrey?
No, it's just average normal size Jeffrey.
What would you like to say, Jeffrey?
Well, what I'd like to say is that I think Keir's got this one wrong, simply because he doesn't need to. Is the majority here we're talking about we're talking about a massive majority, and even if we've got plenty of room to lose a few on this policy.
Yeah, but why lose them now when you don't need to lose them now?
Because it's very, very important that Keir brings to this election what I'm seeing here is that he brings with it some integrity, honesty, decency back to politics, and that is absolutely crucial if we are going to put behind us the 14 years rule of Tory corruption and its lies and how people have generally disconnected from politics because of it. And if we want the country to move forward, it needs to be honest with the electorate. And I think we have to revisit Brexit because it has been so dishonest in the past. And our future depends on a good. I mean,
everything you're saying is true. Everything you're saying is true. And yet, what does he win?
Well, what he wins is integrity. Well,
he's doing pretty well on that front already. Most of the abuse he gets on the integrity front comes from the left of him, not the right of him.
No, and I understand that, but that won't hold up. Is if he comes into power not having acknowledged that something that we all knew all the time, that it had to be dealt with.
Well, you're doing my head, not doing my head in. You're doing my head versus heart thing again, because I can agree with you intellectually, but what does he? But getting into Downing Street is top priority, right?
Yeah. We've done that.
Well, no. It's the world's biggest ice rink and the world's most valuable Ming vase, mate. It's absolutely not over the line. You are counting chickens on a very dangerous level. You might as well stand in front of a room full of Labour voters and start shouting, "All right!" Like Neil Kinnock did back in 1992.
In the laws of probability, we've got.
But what does he gain by doing that? Before the general election,
he's got nothing nothing to lose, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but he's not going to lose you by not doing it, is he?
No, but he can afford to lose a few. But in doing so, has put no risk on his integrity later.
Okay, I like your thinking. I don't necessarily agree with it. That was Ginormous Jeffrey in Richmond, live on LBC. Thomas Watts is here now with the headlines. 10:33 is the time. Dear James, I bought and read your excellent book, How They Broke Britain. It is easily the best political book I've ever read. The least you can do is mention my WhatsApp. That's from Les. There you go, Les. There you go. Job done. Little Les, I think we should call it. No, we'll stop this joke now. It's not funny. 10:33 is the time. There is something else in Robert Harris's analysis, albeit only in a tweet. Poor fellow, woken up this morning, dropped a tweet last night. They're talking about it on national radio today. But I do find Twitter very helpful, even despite all the damage that Elon Musk has done to it. But for seeing what other people are thinking. And even phone-in hosts can embrace opportunities to find out even more about what other people are thinking. But if you look at Brexit's relationship with the Tory party and you look at the calamitous state of the Tory polling and all of Rishi Sunak's missteps, whether it's coming back from D-Day early or the stuff about Sky TV, that they are chiselling away at support for the Conservative Party. That he's around about Liz Truss levels now. So it's not we talked about this yesterday. We're not revisiting the question of how much of this is on Rishi Sunak. We're actually starting the question later of how much of this is on Brexit. Because if you voted for it and you traditionally lean towards the Tories, then you're going to go one of two ways. You either are going to be so cross with them for conning you that now you're going to vote for a different party, or you're one of the truly tragic figures who think there is a brilliant Brexit, but it goes to a different school. So you're going to go back to the liar, go back to the liars, and or you're just going to stick your fingers in your ears and close your eyes and go la 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 whenever anyone talks about Brexit, but you're going to stay on side with the fellas that just talk endlessly about immigration and about how immigration is the only problem in the immigrants. Don't mention the fact that I was married to one. Immigrants. So does that involve pretending that Brexit never happened? I don't know. But I can't see who stays on board with this. I can't see which Brexit voter stays on board with the Tories. So Robert Harris's point works on many levels. The Brexit voter who's still clinging to the unicorn voucher, still thinks that it's deliverable, he's gone. And the Brexit voter who now recognises that they were conned, he's gone as well. She's gone as well. So who's left? So who is this sort of 19% of the electorate that are still on side? That's footballification, isn't it? It must be. They've got their scarves welded around their necks, not just tied tightly. They've been soldered into place. All of which perhaps adds to the wisdom, if you like, of Keir Starmer's decision not to go anywhere near it. Brexit, the great unmentionable. Single most important act of domestic policy making that this country has seen in the post-war period, arguably, is now something about which both major parties are terrified of talking. It's incredible, right? But is Keir Starmer wrong or right to do it? Claire's in York. Claire, what would you like to say?
Oh gosh, thank you for taking my call.
You're not allowed to sound surprised, Claire, that I've taken your call because you've been on hold for 3 minutes.
I know. It's just that I'm so desperate to speak about this.
Well, I'll shut up then and I'll let you.
Because I'm so depressed this morning and so despondent because Farage has been all over the media for hours on end, peddling his snake oil again, normalising and sanitising his bile. And it seems people are willing to fall for it again. I think the last thing this election needs right now to make this general election all about Farage and Brexit again. I think
but it's not. I mean, he's not mentioning Brexit either, is he? To be honest, I'm going to have to rely on you for that because it brings me out in hives. I heard him with Nick the other day trying to make light of the fact that a huge number of their candidates are fully signed up friends of some fascist leader. But, that's like the Pope being a Catholic, isn't it? Or bears defecating in Woodland. He's not talking about Brexit, except presumably to say there is a brilliant Brexit and it goes to a different school. Exactly. That's what he's doing. So people are still in that mindset of thinking it just needs more time to work. And I just think it's better for Keir Starmer to show rather than tell. People don't like to be told. They have to be brought. They have to be encouraged and brought
to see things a better and different way, show why it's going to work, and you can do that best from a place of authority and power. And I think it has to be done gradually. People have to feel that it's their decision to change their mind about it, that they've not been made to feel stupid or wrong or whatever.
Well, they're going to have to be made to feel wrong.
Well, yes, wrong, yes.
You can't.
Yes, sorry,
but stupid is a trickier one, isn't it? Because some of them are stupid, Claire. We can't walk on eggshells all the time.
Sorry.
But I suppose the stupid ones will be the ones still clinging to the idea that it was ever going to be a good idea. At some point, that percentage, I'd probably settle around 10 to 15, I suppose, 10 to 15% of an electorate.
But can I also
of course.
just. There's something else I want to say that's slightly off topic but slightly connected. Is that I just don't think Labour can win. All over the media this morning there's the demonisation of Labour about this child cap business. It's like, 1 minute they're being demonised for having being profligate with money and high tax and all this, and then the next minute, why aren't they being bolder about doing more? So I mean, it's just like they can never win with right wing media unless.
But that's 'twas ever thus, Claire. 'Twas ever thus. There's nothing new.
I just think it seems on steroids at the moment.
Well, that brings us back to Brexit. Brexit broke everything. Everything's bent now because you can't. I mean, that most of the right-wing media is categorically incapable of reflecting reality, because reality would involve saying sorry for what they encouraged all of their readers, viewers, and listeners to do back in 2016, and they can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I just get so fed up with how. When you think of all the tax things that the Tories spoke about the other day, 75 billion on defence is going to be paid for firing a few civil servants, or disability payments are going to be scrapped to pay for tax cuts. And yet that's just all gone in the wash. No one's really talking about that. But this child cap, without looking at the other things.
Labour are getting a kicking for saying that they're going to keep a Tory policy. So who's allowed to give them a kicking for that? If Tory voters aren't, Tory politicians aren't going to keep a Tory policy in place. So you're right, but the hypocrisy, it's a little bit dog bites man, isn't it?
But they're giving breakfast clubs, and as someone who was a single parent, I know how that brings a lot of bang for its buck. That it helps parents get to work, it incentivises children from dysfunctional families get to school, who might not go. Yes. It helps them socialise outside of learning hours, which helps their relationships in school. It helps them start school with a full tummy. There's a lot of bang for your buck there, you know.
No, there is, and I guess we're all guilty of this in a way. Certainly as a phone-in presenter, it's not sexy. Getting calls, getting people like Big Rob riled up, getting calls from you, insightful, intelligent, informed calls, getting disagreement on whether Keir Starmer has got it right. But I don't know that the breakfast clubs lend themselves to that kind of conversation, but they certainly deserve more coverage in the less interactive corners of the British media. 10:41 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Claire in York, thank you. Charlie's in Greenwich. Charlie, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
good morning. I think Keir's got it wrong on this one.
Go on.
I'm afraid. I think he's just gone too hard on it. He in the manifesto, it says in black and white, rule out single market, rule out customs union, rule out freedom of movement. And it uses those three words, make Brexit work, which in my mind, you might as well write that in crayon and surround it with clown emojis, because you can't make it work. It was lies, right? We were sold lies, and you can't make it work. And I'm worried because...
But sometimes pointing out to people that they've been lied to makes them hate you.
Yeah, true.
Take it from me, Charlie. Take it from me.
No, I know, and I've heard it as well. But look, he's written it down in black and white in a manifesto. Like, manifestos are important. It's how the King's Speech is formed. It's how you do the legislative agenda, like the way our politics work. And I just don't think he needed to go that far.
Well, he would say, I presume, or his advisors would say, that if he can do what you've just described and still get a headline saying, surprise, now he says all of Boris's Brexit deal is up for negotiation, then imagine what the headlines would look like if he hadn't done what you've just described.
Yeah, but then you're kind of doing stuff on the basis of what the media are doing, and like the last caller said, you can't win. You can't win against it because it's just not truthful.
Where are the spookable horses? That's the question, isn't it? Because that's the bit none of us know for sure. You've got the vote for doubling down on it, or just completely blaming immigration for absolutely everything. You've got that vote going off to the right of the Tory party now. But the people who are flirting with the idea of Labour while still not regretting their Brexit vote, I don't know who they are and how many of them there are, and nor do you. And until we do, we don't know which of us is right and which of us is wrong.
No, I agree. But it's all about like the conversation and this idea of a shifting over to window, because anyone who's calling for us to rejoin the EU is now seen as an extremist, because all the kind of middle ground are just saying no. Even the Lib Dems and Greens are saying, well, yes, maybe at one point in the future.
I think the Lib Dems have been a bit more outspoken about that.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. But I've been watching these debates and thinking, God, it's a shame I can't vote for an SNP or a Plaid person, because they seem to be the only people shouting from the rooftops, this was a momentous mistake. It's costing us 40 billion a year in tax. We've just spent 4 billion doing customs checks that don't even work,
And for Plaid, certainly, I was very impressed by the Plaid leader last night. I thought he was really good. I didn't see the whole thing, but what I saw, he probably, probably because I knew the least about him before I started watching it. That may be partly why I was so impressed by him, but of course Wales voted to leave, so it's a bolder position for Plaid to adopt than it is for the SNP.
Yes, no, exactly. But I just think the main political parties should join in that conversation. Otherwise,
what do they gain by doing it now at this point? So this conversation will be different in 6 months' time, Charlie. It'd be hugely different in a year, and it would have been different 6 months ago. So,
it's true. But I mean, like I said, he's put it in black and white. That these things are ruled out. The last time I called in on your show, we were talking about freedom of movement and the damage it's done to touring musicians, because I just helped, fill the Albert Hall with the EU flags at the last night of the proms. But these are issues that our country faces, and he's ruling things out in black and white, which is going to be very difficult to reopen.
And the weird thing is, the polling is it's never completely infallible, is it? But the most recent one I've found has rejoin, not just renegotiate at 62 and stay out at 38. So it's as if those of us who would be in that 62, if push really came to shove, if it was a binary choice between rejoining and staying out, it's as if for many people it's less of an issue than it is for you. You're all on the same team, you're all cheering for the same end result, but they are more patient than you, more optimistic perhaps than you. And by that I simply mean that just because that has been written in this manifesto doesn't mean it's off the table forever. Or just less married to the idea than you are. And he's probably got that right. He's probably got that right.
I just feel that there needs to be more voices to shift the conversation.
Which is why the post-election period is going to be absolutely fascinating. And this isn't going to be at the top of the list. I think the NHS is going to be at the top of the list, something we may talk about a little later in the programme. Charlie, thank you. I think we'll carry on with this. Bring in that question about whether or not it is, as Robert Harris contends, the thing that has done for the Tories more than anything else. Is it Brexit? Because that puts the Tory press in such a tricky position. Daily Mail today still moaning that Keir Starmer might change Boris Johnson's Brexit deal, which even the bloke who negotiated it has tried to disown. It's quite extraordinary, really. And of course, we know that Boris Johnson's Brexit deal needed to be improved by Rishi Sunak and the Windsor framework. Maybe people just don't know enough. I don't mean that in a condescending fashion. Maybe the detail is a little bit enervating for people, but that will be put on ice for now. That will be put on hold for now, because up next will be our first guest to help me properly commemorate the 7th anniversary of the Grenfell Tower tragedy and the 72 people whose lives it stole. It is 10:51. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It is 7 years today since I was coming to work. Back then I used to come to work in a car, not on public transport, and I was reeling from images of a building I knew well burning and the unknowable extent of the unfolding tragedy. And then something else very strange happened, which I think informed the way that we opened the show that morning. I started reading about the work of the Grenfell Action Group. I started reading the work of a blog under the title Grenfell Action Group that had been set up by two men, Edward Defan and Francis O'Connor. And one of them is about to join me, Ed Defan, a survivor of the tragedy and now a committee member of Grenfell United. But what was so staggering then and remains so stunning now is that 6 months before that fire, they had written these words: "It is our conviction that a serious fire in a tower block is the most likely reason that those who wield power at the Kensington and Chelsea Tenant Management Organisation will be found out and brought to justice." I couldn't get my head around it then, and I can't get my head around it now, that people like Ed not only feared the worst, but in many ways expected it. And then, of course, it happened. But we begin this conversation, Ed. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you're well. With I guess, a status report, 7 years since the tragedy, and I think I can probably safely predict that the kind of progress you might have hoped for has not materialised.
Morning, James. I mean, in the days after the fire itself, when I stood underneath the carcass of the tower, I was quite convinced that it would be, probably naively now, but it would be the catalyst for change. So, I mean, I actually felt like deep societal change. 7 years later on, as you say, it's a depressingly familiar story that we feel so little progress has been made. At Grenfell United, we focus on three prime objectives: to obtain the truth about what happened, to seek justice in convictions for the perpetrators that saw 72 people lose their lives, 18 children among them, and many subsequent to the fire. We've lost many community members, people that lived in the tower, relations of bereaved family members who have not lived to see justice. And, you know, we need to see criminal convictions. We haven't seen a single clink of handcuffs to date. And we also need to see change. We need to see change that will create a lasting legacy for the 72 lives that were lost. And I'm afraid progress in that department has been glacial. And it's tortuous, and it's very difficult to deal with.
I know that you and your colleagues estimate about 600,000 people are still living in buildings clad similarly to Grenfell. I mean, that is, everyone listening now, Ed, is going to reel from that statistic, and then humans being humans, they'll move on to something else. We'll forget about it and move on. For you and your colleagues, you can't. These statistics, these figures must haunt you.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, we can move on, but also, you know, we're going to the ballot box soon. We've had to put up with a government who have, over the last 7 years and 5 years since the Phase 1 report, demonstrated inaction, indifference and incompetence. Because if they hadn't done that, they would have delivered on some of the meaningful change that needed to happen. We've had 4 prime ministers. We've had, I think, 8 secretaries of state. And I have genuinely lost count of the amount of housing ministers we've had. Yeah. And I mean, we can't, you know, as campaigners, as bereaved and survivors, we can't deliver the change that needs to come. We can advocate for it. We can try and hold those with power accountable, but we can't deliver. And the people who have had responsibility to deliver have failed us.
To pick up on a couple of things that you've just alluded to, I guess the first phase of the public inquiry, 2019, as you say, made pretty clear recommendations that, as you say, have been more or less ignored, many of which have been completely ignored by government. And then the personal emergency evacuation plan, which people listening may not be fully across. But this was, in many ways, a response to the fact that 41% of the residents who died that night had disabilities, and this would provide any disabled resident of a building with a personal plan to get them out of a building safely in the event of a fire. That hasn't been brought in either, and it could have been. The recommendation was pretty clear on what implementation would look like. On a personal level, how do you account for this glacial? Well, this isn't even glacial. This is stationary. How do you account for the absence of action, given what you said about your feelings in the days immediately after the tragedy, where you thought that proper change had become, in tragic circumstances, absolutely inevitable?
So, I mean, we look at the recommendations of phase one of the report. We actually can go back even further and look at the recommendations from the Lakanal house fire in 2009 that saw the death of 6 people. And if you put the recommendation of that coroner report next to the phase one report of Sir Martin Moore-Bick, they were almost identical. And had those original recommendations from Lakanal House been acted upon, Grenfell may well have been avoided. So I think what the problem here, I mean, like the Grenfell Tower inquiry has cost £170 million to date. The fact that at the end of that, the government that is in power has no obligation to act on those recommendations is absolutely shocking. And, you know, for whatever reason, whether it's because they're concerned about the financial implications.
Do you think that's the big, is that the big factor here, the cost? So they sort of push it to the back of the desk because doing what would be right and what would save lives is subject to a cost-benefit ratio, and the cost is too high to justify the lives that would be saved.
That is most definitely a factor here. I think also, and it pains me to say this, is that, you know, for quite a long time now, I feel that we haven't had a functioning system that is able to bring the necessary change in place. And in fact, the most important part about today is always to remember the 72 lives that were lost. And that's at the heart of what today is always going to be about. But also, we're working with the infected blood campaigners, we're working with COVID bereaved families to call upon whichever party forms the next government to implement a national oversight mechanism, which very simply is a independent public body that will analyse, monitor and follow up on recommendations by public inquiries to ensure that governments can't just kick them into the long grass, and to ensure that, you know, the changes that need to happen from these public inquiries are acted upon. And
the call for that national oversight mechanism is indeed in honour of the 72 loved ones that we will all be commemorating today. There's a silent walk tonight, I think, Ed, in North Kensington.
There is. We're gathering at 6:30 outside the Methodist Church in Lancaster Road. And after the march takes place, we will have Pete Apps, who I believe is on your show in a little while.
Yes, he is.
And we're going to have members of both Infected Blood Campaign and COVID bereaved family members speaking.
Final question: do you derive any optimism from the way in which, I mean, the wheels of justice grind ever slow, but the infected blood scandal has kind of reached an apotheosis? The Hillsborough tragedy. Many of the families there feel that they did finally achieve a semblance of justice. Does that give you hope that even though it may take far too long and much longer than anyone could in good conscience allow, that you will eventually, you have to keep believing, don't you?
Sure. So if we're looking at truth, justice and change, I think with the public inquiry, I think the evidence about the core participants was so explicit and so damning. I can't believe that, you know, this carousel of blame pointing will come to an end on September the 4th when the report is published. When it comes to justice, when it comes to change, I'm less convinced that we're going to get what we actually need to feel satisfied.
Edward Daffan, thank you so much. It's always a bittersweet experience talking to you, but I'm very grateful for your time and, of course, for the work that you and your colleagues at Grenfell United continue to do. And as Ed said, we will be talking to Peter Apps, who is an absolutely brilliant journalist, working in the field of housing, but has done amazing work specifically in the field of Grenfell as well. We'll be talking to him towards the end of the next hour. The time now is 11:01. 5 minutes after 11 is the time. David makes a powerful point that I think I will read in its entirety. He says, to anyone who thinks that cutting red tape is the solution to the complex problems that we face in society, look no further than Grenfell. In an age of the 24-hour media cycle, TikTok shorts and deplorables like Farage selling, quotes, common sense solutions, end quotes, to highly complex problems, we want solutions to everything immediately without any due consideration for the complexities necessary to protect the public. To anyone who doubts this, you need look no further than the web of blame cast by the Grenfell inquiry to understand just how messy it gets when industries and governments neglect the rules of the game in the pursuit of greed or statistics to pin a record on. The rules of the game are there to protect us all, and we ignore them at our peril. There have been so many moments during our time together, during the years that I've had the great privilege of being able to talk with you every morning. There are so many moments that have seemed significant. Listening to Edward talk there about standing in the shadow of the carcass of Grenfell and thinking, as someone who predicted the tragedy almost to the syllable 6 months before it actually happened, and thinking, well, it's going to have to change now. And then speaking to him 7 years later and seeing that combination of resolve and disappointment that it hasn't happened yet. That's the kind of thing I mean, these moments that you feel are going to change things and turn out not to. Do you remember what Jacob Rees-Mogg said about Grenfell? Do you remember when he said that the people who died because they lacked common sense? He said it in this studio. And you'd think, wouldn't you, that there would be some sort of sanction in the British media for people like that. Once you cross a certain line, maybe the phone will ring a little less often with invitations to come onto programmes and have your chin tickled, or phone calls from newspaper journalists saying, "Oh, could you give me a quote on this?" Or people sticking microphones under their noses on St Stephen's Green. You'd think there'd be some sort of sanction in place. You speak that casually about the tragic death of 72 people. You almost blame, well, not almost, you blame them effectively for being too stupid to flee when they chose to follow the advice of the emergency services. And it doesn't touch the sides of your reputation in some circles. In fact, I think Rees-Mogg is one of those people that got given his own show on one of these weird new TV channels. And that's part of the problem. That's part of what's broken, that relationship between appalling conduct and meaningful consequence. And remember that when Owen Paterson was caught breaking lobbying rules, Jacob Rees-Mogg was one of the ringleaders of the attempts to rip up the rule book. Not to encourage his friend to take his medicine, to take the punishment for the offences he'd been found guilty of committing, but to actually rip up the rule book in order to get him off the hook. And I mention that because he's one of the loudest critics of, quotes, red tape, end quotes, that David in Birmingham quite rightly reminds us is actually the mechanism by which we protect ourselves from tragedies. 8 minutes after 11 is the time. So back to the B word. Oh, I said I wasn't going to use that phrase anymore. Back to this conversation about Keir Starmer's tactics, but with a side order now of whether or not that how much. Here's the question for you, and I would quite like you to answer this from the perspective of somebody who voted for it, and even ideally someone who still thinks it was a good idea. Although I grant you that it takes quite a long run up to come on the radio and actually admit that out loud. How much of the damage, how much of the Tory disaster, the unfolding Tory disaster, tracks back to Brexit? I want you to think about this either as as an amateur analyst or as a case study. How much of Rishi Sunak's current problems, how much of the Tory party's catastrophic polling goes back to Brexit? 0345 6060 973. So we're looking at Keir Starmer's decision not to go near it. In fact, as Charlie reminded us in Greenwich a moment ago, not just not to go near it, but actually to go much further than he needs to put a cordon sanitaire around it, to stress, to state in black and white, no customs union, no single market, and the rest of it. So that decision, right or wrong, but now we'll add to the mix this question about Robert Harris's observation, the great journalist and author Robert Harris's observation, that the Tory disaster essentially tracks back almost entirely to Brexit and the failure, if you like, to deliver the impossible. So it sends people who voted for it and still don't realise how silly that was, or still don't realise how badly they were misled. It sends them scurrying for the nativist snarls of a Nigel Farage, and any Conservative voter who voted to remain has seen their party make an enormous mess of an already bad situation. So there's quite a strong case here, isn't there, for there's quite a strong case for arguing that Robert Harris has a point. How do you see it? How much of the Tory problems can track back to Brexit? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. 11 minutes after 11 is the time. And of course, the other problem with this omerta, this phrase that Robert deploys, the great unmentionable, the other problem with that is it means we're not getting the full picture. You're not getting the full picture of how many problems are being caused by the aftermath of this referendum result. And that's why, I mean, bless their little cotton socks, or indeed in Big Rob's case, bless their big cotton socks. That's the problem. That's why we have to keep talking about it, because, you know, news this week, I don't know if you're aware of it, Dutch lorry drivers are considering just not coming here anymore. It's too much of a faff. They don't need to. There's lots of other places they can go to earn their wages without having to drive consignments into the United Kingdom. You know, this is the Netherlands, not Kuala Lumpur. This is just a hop, skip and a jump away. But we have made it such a faff to come here that they are now considering not coming here at all. And that you won't read that in the Daily Mail. Probably won't hear it on the BBC. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but that's the problem. In that the omerta, or tempting though it would be to say, oh, let's all never talk about it again. You can't if the ramifications continue. If the ripples from that massive brick lobbed into the pond of the United Kingdom in 2016, if the ripples aren't going anywhere, you can't ignore them. They're washing up on our shores all the time. Back to Starmer, though, I think. Patrick is in Reading. Patrick, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. How are you?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
So I think with Starmer, I think he can't talk about it yet. And there's kind of three reasons for that, I think. I think the first one is the kind of, it was your caller before, Charlie, mentioned it really, really well about kind of the psychological element of telling a country they're wrong, or the electorate they're
tricky.
Wrong. And kind of having to drag people slowly towards that realisation. I think it's something similar that Blair and Brown did in their first term, like 2 or 3 years of sticking to Tory spending policies. People were like, oh, that isn't great. And then they kind of came in with working tax credits, child tax credits. And people kind of thought, that's a bit better. I think the second element, and I think this is maybe where I personally believe, I've got no evidence for this, just an opinion.
That's the spirit.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're talking about Brexit.
That's the fashion.
So I think that line may have been edited in the manifesto or added after Farage entered into the election.
So we're back to the Spookable Horses, aren't we? Which is definitely a name for a band, I think. One day someone should start a band called the Spookable Horses. But I don't know how spookable those horses are. How many spookable horses are? People who are flirting with Labour, but if Starmer didn't do what he's done, they would be tempted to flirt with Farage, if you could just bleach your mind.
I don't want to do that. Although there was a comment on X about Penny Mordaunt flirting in inverted commas with Farage, and that was I
don't think you need it. I don't think anyone that benefits from you bringing that to our attention, mate.
No, I'm sorry. But I think that comes to the second point, where it's the opposition to the idea, which is, and Starmer was very adept at taking weapons away that can be used against him. I think this is, minus Farage, of course, the biggest weapon of all is talking about Brexit in a very positive way, the EU in a positive way. I think that's the fuel to the fire for something like the Daily Mail or whoever to start saying, look, see, he's going to do it. And then that changes.
Which they're doing anyway, but they'd be doing it with a lot more oomph if it was actually true, as opposed to doing it, trying to do it when he's actually done the exact opposite.
Exactly. And what I think the kind of calculation from Starmer's point of view is, let's see what happens if Farage does get elected as an MP. Let's see what happens around him potentially cannibalising the Conservative Party, potentially becoming leader, all of these. But Starmer's very good at getting rid of leaders of opposition parties. It's him that trapped Johnson into lying in Parliament, which is what finally kind of got rid of him. And I think he would be focused on doing that with Farage. I think that leads on to the third point, which hasn't really been mentioned, is it's the other side of the conversation, which is at this point the EU doesn't want us back.
No,
okay,
and we don't we don't even come close to meeting some of the preconditions, which is why the rejoin polling is a little bit, I don't want to say silly, but unhelpful perhaps.
Yeah, and I think as well, like Starmer talking about growth so pervasively, I think that's a coded message to the EU. Exactly, of saying two things. So one, growing the economy to a point where it's more stable. Two, having that the elimination of the conversation of people saying, oh, the EU are terrible. But also three, I think probably the most important point is getting the pound to a really strong position where it can't be on the table to become part of the euro as well, because that would be potentially a deal breaker from our side. And and I think the point you made around the Conservative Party, I think it's pretty much the thing that's done it for them, because they campaigned so extensively for this.
It was going to be the panacea. It was going to be the solution to all of our problems. It was going to be the light at the end of the tunnel, the holy grail, the Santa's sack. All of it was going to be amazing.
Absolutely. And I think like the fact that immigration is just, I think the immigration, it's a totally different phone-in, but I mean, the Hong Kong numbers and the Ukrainian numbers are included.
Yeah,
exactly. And I think this is the thing that
it's going to halve next year. Net migration is going to halve next year, and Keir Starmer will be able to do a lap of honour.
Exactly, and I think that's the thing that people don't want to say. And so that's my kind of thoughts on that.
I like it. I like it all. And that idea of it being, I don't imagine. No, that's not true. There's, it's the biggest audience in commercial radio in the whole country. This show now, for a talk show, not for a music show. There's still a few bigger than me on that front. But the idea that there's nobody listening who voted for Brexit and would be tempted to vote for Keir Starmer's Labour Party this time round, but not if he looks like he's going to start undoing Brexit. That I don't know how you count them. I don't know how we get a handle on how many of those people there are, because Patrick must be right. They must be part of the Starmer calculations. But there you go. That's the great phrase of the day. The spookable horses are on the gallops. It's 11:17. 20 minutes after 11 is the time. I'm drawn. We were just having a chat during that little junction about the not for EU food labels. Have you seen them yet? Would you buy that? I'm not buying that. I wouldn't buy it, because it is. I know it's a bit more complicated than this allows, and it's all to do with the Windsor Framework and the Boris Johnson's lies about the borders in the Irish Sea. But it's essentially a label saying hasn't been checked as rigorously as it would have been if we were still in the EU, isn't it? We could do this as a side order on the phone-in, actually. It kicked in about October, but I think I've seen one on a chicken recently. Have you seen one on a chicken? I think I've seen one on a chicken. I'm not going to buy a chicken that says not for EU. Is that fair? I think Joyce in Sheffield rang in with this, and she's seen one on a chicken as well. I love the idea. I get a bit obsessed with the idea of you turning on your radio just at a little moment and wondering what on earth we're talking about, which is why sometimes I have to repeat myself. But if you turned on your radio now and you heard me say, Joyce in Sheffield has seen one on a chicken, what would you guess? What would be the top 5 possibilities that we were talking about? Joyce in Sheffield, right, she's seen one on a chicken. WhatsApp me now with what you think we're talking about. Can you get it on gammon? Has anyone seen it on gammon? Has anyone seen not for EU on a gammon steak? Because they'd probably go like hot cakes, wouldn't they? People would be hoovering them up. They're not for EU gammons. That's absolutely perfect cuisine for a certain part of the population, I'd have thought. So I don't actually know, but I was slightly surprised to see one on a chicken. See what on a chicken? Not for EU, like the sticker that says it. And that can't be great news for farmers, can it? They're on every product in Northern Ireland. Well, they can't be on every product in Northern Ireland, but Niles in Derry, he's certainly seen a lot of them. We buy them and we take them across the border because we've got no other choice. I don't know if you should be doing that. Are you allowed to do that for personal consumption? I presume, of course you are, yeah, but you're just not allowed to sell them. Oh, dear. But anyway, it was all a brilliant idea. 22 minutes after 11 is the time. What's your WhatsApp number, please, says this texter. Well, guess. 0345 6060 973. I wake up saying that number in my sleep sometimes. It's like a Pavlov's dog. 0345 6060 973. It's 22 minutes after 11. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC 03456060973. I could do all of that like AI. You don't need me here for those bits, but you need me here for these bits. Joshua is in Durham to steer us back to the conversation either about Keir Starmer or about the Conservative Party and both of their relationships with Brexit. Joshua, what would you like to say? We may never find out. I've bored him into submission. Julie's in Waltham Forest. Julie, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know whether it's personality or it is with the Conservatives, their ambition of, what's his name? Cameron was the problem in the first place, wasn't it? He agreed to do the referendum if he was going to be leader. Isn't that the case?
If he was going to be Prime Minister, they campaigned on it in order to stop the Conservative Party. And here's the funny bit. No, you've got to say this out loud, Julie, because this is the funny bit. Because in order to stop the Conservative Party hemorrhaging support to Nigel Farage's outfit. So that's worked out well for him, hasn't it?
No, not at all. But the thing is, you see, it's like Starmer's not going to be, suddenly giving any suspicions about Brexit, going back on the deal, on the 48-52, whatever it was, because if they just don't read a lot, do they? I'm not casting aspersions on the, the intellectual capacity.
You are a bit.
But they don't read a lot.
Who?
So they'll go, well, Brexit voters, they didn't read a lot, did they?
Well, they did. They read the Daily Mail, they read the Daily Telegraph, they read the Sun, they read the Daily Express. They read loads.
And it would get them what they wanted. It got them what they wanted. But they didn't read the consequences. So hence you got people
They didn't believe
retired.
the consequences. They did read the consequences. I'm not picking hairs. Picking hairs, splitting hairs, picking fights. They did. They just believed it was all nonsense. They called it was all called Project Fit. I've got sympathy for the people that you're maligning.
But the thing is, what about the people that would retire or were living in the EU and they voted to leave?
Yeah, I'm not resurrecting that conversation. We've had that 564 times. I want more from you on why the Tories' current disaster in the polls, how many of those roads lead back to Brexit?
Oh, I think a big chunk of it all leads back to Brexit. The thing is, you see, they didn't put. All they had to do, Farage, all he had to do was put a great big, knee-jerk argument which people would latch onto, and that was it. He didn't have to justify it. And then you got Boris going on the same thing, get Brexit done. He wasn't ever going into the detail of it, and that's the problem. People just took.
And they still can't talk about it. None of them can still talk about it. None of them can still sort of say, well, that was a shame. And there's still, not even really mentioning the Windsor framework. You could arguably describe that as one of Rishi Sunak's finest achievements, genuine achievements as Prime Minister. But because it involved unpicking some of the entirely self-inflicted damage that Boris Johnson had done to our islands, then Rishi Sunak can't really make great capital out of that without annoying all of the newspapers that Julie and I have just alluded to as encouraging all of their readers to vote for the apocalypse. It's mad. It's not. I worry that when the general election comes around, my book's sort of going to drop off the radar. It's not going to matter anymore how they broke Britain. But it's so arresting to see it all assembled in one place. Well, at least I can't say that because I wrote the thing. But it is so arresting to assemble it all in one place. And to see how insane some of these continuing situations are. So Rishi Sunak essentially and successfully undid some of the stupidity of what David Frost negotiated with regard to Ireland. Do you know what David Frost said about the Irish bit of the negotiations? That he said, well, it would have all worked perfectly if the EU hadn't actually implemented what we agreed. I mean, how do you deal with people like that? Well, I know what you do with people like that. You give them a column in the Daily Telegraph next to Nick Timothy, who was responsible for calling the 2017 election because he thought Theresa May would romp home. So that's part of the problem, is rewarding these incompetents with more jobs and more attention all the time. But that bit there, Rishi Sunak arguably he deserves credit for it. That's why you've got the not for EU stickers on your chickens and your gammons. Because of what was negotiated, because of what Rishi Sunak managed to get the EU to agree to. It's a bit of a concession from them on this, which they did to prioritise the safety of the island of Ireland. And And yet he can't really do a lap of honour on that. What have you achieved as Prime Minister? And he just talks about eat out to help out or something. Waiting lists have gone up for the NHS this week. Growth has stalled and waiting lists have gone up. And yet the sense that many of the problems that have led them into this polling disaster go back to Brexit is impossible to shake. Then the mad bit, the how they broke Britain bit of this equation, is the fact that the man who lied loudest and longest about Brexit, Nigel Farage, is the one that is benefiting from the failure of the people charged with delivering the impossible to deliver the impossible. So, you know, I don't know, even if Labour get in at the next election and Keir Starmer does start trying to turn the oil tanker around very, very slowly, I don't know that some of these problems of a complete breakdown in standards and reality are going to go away. 28 after 11 is the time. Joshua is in Durham, hopefully ready this time. Joshua, what would you like to say?
Hi, thanks for having me, James.
You're very welcome. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I enjoy the show. Well, I think Keir Starmer's actually playing an absolute blinder this election campaign.
Yes.
He's not mentioned Brexit, albeit that's fine. But
no one has, to be honest.
No, nobody has. He's on cue to get an absolute supermajority. If he gets that,
I'm not allowing that word on my programme, Joshua, and it's not your fault. You're perfectly entitled to use it, but not on this show because it's utterly meaningless and it doesn't have any relevance in the United Kingdom whatsoever, and I don't fully understand why people who should know better have fallen into the Tory trap of using it. There's no difference between a 200-seat majority and an 80-seat majority constitutionally, so the phrase supermajority is hereby banned on the James O'Brien experience.
Well, I might disagree with you on that.
You can't. I've banned the use of the word. How are you going to disagree with me about it when the word doesn't even allow? I don't even allow the word on the programme.
Okay. Well, he's going to have a majority.
You can say a massive majority, but the supermajority is an importation of an American phenomenon that simply can't apply in our parliamentary democracy.
Okay. Yeah. So he's going to be able to make essentially any laws that he wants to make. So if he wanted to change the way that we've left Brexit, he's going to be able to do that once he's got that majority.
Yes.
He's not mentioning Brexit, but what are Labour trying to do? They're trying to focus on the actual problems affecting people's day-to-day life. That might be contributing because of Brexit, but they're trying to focus on cost of living crisis. They're trying to focus on like food banks, all those sorts of things that real people are facing, and energy prices. Okay, we're coming up into summer, so it's not going to be as bad, but come winter, if they don't make any big changes, more and more people are going to be going to food banks, aren't they?
Mm. So so it just doesn't feel whether it should or not, and it's possibly a failure of media that we don't understand how many of the problems you've just described are exacerbated by the fact that we've become the first population in human history to vote to impose economic sanctions on itself.
Yeah.
The public, there's two things going on. There's the facts and then there's the feelings, and the public are not interested in the role that Brexit has played in making the cost of living crisis worse. They're interested in how Keir Starmer's going to make it better.
Exactly. I think people are just fatigued with the B word, aren't they?
What?
We've heard nothing but it.
Wash your mouth out. You're on the James O Brexit programme. You can't say that. This is outrageous. Some people are fatigued with it. Largely, mate. You sound quite young, so I don't know what category you fall into. Largely, the people who are fatigued with it, the people who don't want to talk about it, are the people who voted for it. And I kind of think tough in their case. You voted for it. We're not going to shut up about it until we've started undoing the damage that you've done. But yeah, I grant you, some days I even feel, I don't know if I can face another conversation about this.
Yeah, I mean, we had Boris Johnson saying he had an oven-ready deal. It came out more half-baked, really, didn't it? I mean, It's been an absolutely unmitigated disaster. And I think, well, what was a throwaway manifesto pledge from David Cameron has turned into this absolute abomination.
And the man who lied longest and loudest about it is the one who's benefiting most from it in the polls at the moment. It is evidence, once again, of the breakages, the breaking. And speaking of polls, a new one has dropped while we have been on air, puts Labour at 43, the Conservatives at 19, the Lib Dems at 11, Reform at 16, Greens at 6, SNP at 2, and others at 3%. 32 after 11 is the time. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. It is 11:35. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I know this from Darren that says, I was thinking the other day, James, who's actually benefited from Brexit? The only person I can think of is you. This is the cross that I bear, Darren. I have benefited enormously from Brexit, but you know, I always say when people point this out, I say, yeah, very good for business, very bad for the soul. Certainly now, by about 2020, I think once I'd become a best-selling author off the back of all this madness, I think I would happily have seen a bit of a reversal, if you like, a sacrifice some of the grist to the phone-in mill upon the altar of wanting what's best for my country. So it's a really tricky position to be in, to benefit from damage being done to your own country, because you're one of the only people actually pointing it out. And of course, it's the people who did the damage to our country that are claiming to be patriotic by insisting that we need to get rid of all the foreigners, which brings us back to the role that Brexit has played in undoing the Tory party. How much of their catastrophic polling is down to, as Robert Harris attests this morning, is down to Brexit, i.e. the people who didn't want it are still furious, and the people who did want it feel let down and betrayed, or conned. You know, if they've realised their mistake, they feel conned. If they haven't realised their mistake, they feel betrayed. It's 11:36. Steve's in Exeter. Steve, what would you like to say?
Well, I think that the downfall of the Conservatives is not because of Brexit. I know you like to blame Brexit on pretty much everything.
No, mate. Just the things that I can use evidence to show that it is responsible for or contributing to.
Your evidence, the downfall of the Conservatives is because of the state of the Parliament.
Right.
You've got
so why are Labour doing so well then? Because they're in the same. They're in the same Parliament.
Labour are doing well because obviously you got the polls wrong with the Brexit vote. So
no, I didn't. I predicted it, Steve.
We'll see what happens.
I literally predicted it. You can find the tapes. But anyway, I just want to examine your thinking here. So the Conservatives are in trouble because of the state of Parliament, to which my response was, well, how come Labour are doing so brilliantly in the same polls when they sit...
at the moment...
Hang on, let me finish the question.
Okay.
When they sit in exactly the same Parliament that is responsible for the downfall of the conservatories.
Conservatives, not conservatories.
Yeah.
That's what I fit. So basically, it is down to the whole of Parliament.
Yeah.
I can't see Brexit as
no, but just explain to me why it's Parliament and Labour are in it as well.
Okay, because we've got so many corrupt, criminal MPs.
Well,
in
be
that
careful.
Parliament.
We got libel laws there, but you're saying the Conservative Party, the parliamentary Conservative Party, is full of corrupt criminals.
Not just Conservatives.
Right.
Labour, Lib Dems.
Yeah.
Basically, you've got MPs in there who threaten to throw acid in people's faces.
MPs who what? I just got to be careful. I don't want you to libel anybody. And remember,
I'm not libeling anybody. An MP got charged in court, so you're allowed to say it, for threatening to throw acid in a female's face. She's still sat on the bench.
Yeah.
You've got MPs.
But that doesn't explain the collapse in the Conservatives' polling, does it?
Because they've been in power for 14 years,
Steve,
and they haven't delivered anything.
There's no need for us to fall out. We're talking about the collapse in the Conservatives' polling.
Yes,
the Conservative Party's polling. So the behaviour of MPs from other parties is not going to be the reason why the Conservatives have hemorrhaged support. So
no, I know.
So your answer to that question, if we both slow down a bit, your answer to the question of why the Conservatives are hemorrhaging support is the state of Parliament.
Yeah,
but the Labour Party...
But let me finish...
Well, I'd like you to start, Steve, if you could, because the Labour Party is doing very, very well in the same polls.
They've been in power for 14 years, so whoever's in power gets the chop, OK? They haven't delivered anything. They haven't delivered
Brexit.
All the manifesto promises.
They delivered Brexit.
Well, have they really? I think because they haven't delivered Brexit. They've delivered
they have. It's happened.
No, we've come out, but there's so many caveats to it. There's so many, like what's happened in Northern Ireland, the border down the sea, and
but that was always going to.
European Union.
That was always going to happen. Everybody who paid attention understood that.
It doesn't always happen because there's borders in
because of the Good Friday Agreement. You see.
Yeah, the Good Friday Agreement. They use that as a weapon.
No, mate, that's a treaty.
Parliament, hold on, because of Parliament at the time, you had so many people trying to frustrate it.
Right.
You had Theresa May who didn't even want it. So you had people trying to deliver it who didn't actually really think about it.
But now you're explaining why Brexit has broken the Tories.
No, what I'm saying is the whole of Parliament tried to frustrate the actual withdrawal agreement, which played in the hands of the EU. So we had to sign.
But now you're explaining how Brexit has done so much damage to the Tory party. You came on to explain why it hasn't.
No, it's two separate things.
Yeah.
We're talking about Brexit on that, and the downfall of the Tories is because they've been in power for 14 years. They haven't delivered nothing, and people.
But they delivered Brexit,
whether you
Steve.
think the Labour are the roses, smelling roses, it's the whole of Parliament. Yeah. So they've been in power. So the only reason Keir will get in power is by default. The Brexit people won't vote for him. Labour voters, you can put a rose on a donkey, they'll still vote for them. They will win by default. If they get a lot of MPs, like I know you don't say this supermajority.
So in a sentence, if we could, the Tories are currently hemorrhaging support in the polls because of Parliament.
Because they haven't delivered what they said to do.
What did they say they'd do?
Well,
what's the big thing that you feel that they've let you down on?
Well, the state of the economy.
That's not it, Steve, is it?
Pardon?
We both know what you were about to say then.
What was I about to say?
Brexit, mate.
No, I wasn't going to say Brexit.
Because it got frustrated and they couldn't deliver it, and there's all these caveats, and Theresa May didn't want it, and they frustrated it at every turn.
You just said Brexit was delivered.
Yeah, I know, but you said it wasn't.
No, not in the way I wanted it to deliver.
Exactly. And who didn't deliver it?
Because they were frustrated.
Simple question: who didn't deliver it?
Because it was frustrated.
Who didn't deliver it?
Well, obviously, it was the government in power.
At what party was that?
At what party was that? By Parliament.
At what party was that?
Yeah, it's the Conservatives.
So who didn't deliver Brexit? Who didn't deliver Brexit then?
No, they've got rid of Boris Johnson by a coup. You've got somebody in there who was put in against the members. So if you want to know the members will not vote for Rishi because they didn't listen to the membership. It wasn't a democracy. They put him in there by a coup. So that's why support for them is falling. It's not falling because of Brexit. It's falling because they went against the membership.
It's 11:42. Lee's in Frankfurt. Lee, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi James.
Hello.
Awesome fade out. Yeah,
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. I think he just stepped away from his phone very, very slowly.
Yeah, maybe they just cut off or something.
Carry on.
I don't know. We spoke about a year ago. We had a glass of very expensive wine celebrating the start of this mess, unravelling. We're now raging alcoholics here in Frankfurt.
So is Starmer getting it right?
Yes, he's getting it absolutely right? Because this takes 5 to 8, maybe 10 years. You've got to remember the UK is not currently compliant as an accession candidate.
Not even close.
Not even close. Under Article 49, the 6 Copenhagen agreements. Yeah, you got to remember the €2.3 billion fine last year that the UK paid for the Chinese border.
Yes, you know more about this than I do, actually. But this is why that phrase that I deployed earlier, rejoin polls, are actually quite unhelpful.
Yeah, they're totally unhelpful. This is a super soft step, slow integration. Starmer's using exactly the right language. This ain't coming for 5-8 years. The damage was done way back. Do
you think it'll be in the manifesto? Do you think he'll address it the next if he wins in the next general election? Would it become a manifesto issue?
It'll be second term because remember they need 5 years to unwind the trade deals.
Yes,
James. You're forgetting the CPPT, the TP11 agreement.
Yes, exactly. TCP.
You're forgetting Australia, New Zealand. You're forgetting the Latin America deal they did, the accession islands. You've got to unwind all of that stuff to be compliant.
He knows, doesn't he? Starmer knows.
Yeah, he knows, right? Reeves knows, Lammy knows, Starmer knows. This is a 5-6 year transition. It'll come. Yeah, reality will dawn. It's all fine. We'll get back to normality at some point, but this is a 6-8 year trade.
And then the second bit, I know you didn't necessarily ring in to answer this, but I've got to ask you anyway. How much of the Tories' current travails track back to Brexit? In any way, shape or form?
98%.
It's just inarguable, isn't it?
Corruption.
2% corruption. 1% corruption, 1% the state of Parliament, if you don't mind, and 98% back to Brexit. And in fact, the first message to come in response to your call, Lee, is a bingo in capital letters with a whopping great exclamation mark. And I think I agree. And that's head. That is brain. That's not heart. That's just pragmatics. The feelings kick in, I suppose, with the optimism and the belief that they do know what is going on and what rapprochement is going to look like. Thank you, Lee. After this next junction, we will speak to Peter Apps of Inside Housing magazine about the 7-year anniversary of the Grenfell Tower tragedy, which, of course, is being marked today, and the passing of 72 people, including 14 children who died that night. 41% of the total number of dead, of course, were disabled. It is 11:46. It is 11:49 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'm going to read you something from the Substack of a journalist called Peter Apps, who also works for Inside Housing magazine and won the Orwell Prize for his extraordinary book, Show Me the Bodies, How We Let Grenfell Happen. I'm just going to read you 2 paragraphs from something that he wrote earlier this week. I hate the week of the anniversary. I hate saying the same things I said last year, and the year before that, and the year before that. I hate the end of this remaining so far away, always on the horizon, never getting closer. Another year ticked off with so little to show in terms of progress towards justice and change. And if this is how I feel, as a journalist with no pre-existing personal ties to Grenfell and no trauma from the night of the fire, I can't even begin to imagine how horrible this week feels for someone who lost their home, their parents, their children, to this utterly avoidable disaster. Peter Apps joins me now. Peter, thank you. Not just for coming on the show today, but also for writing that, which resonated incredibly with me. How do we know how much of this slowness, Edward was on earlier, Edward Defan, he used the word glacial to describe the progress towards consequences or towards justice. How do we know how much of it is avoidable? How do we know which bits could have moved quicker? How do we know the things that have never got closer, that are always on the horizon? How do we identify the elements of it that could have moved more quickly, that could have moved closer by now?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, James. I mean, I think there are parts of kind of unpicking the truth around something like this. And, you know, we don't have a particularly good process for bringing to account criminals when those criminals are kind of white-collar companies, corporations, and potentially even government employees. And so these things do move slowly, but you know, the community have always been told that the inquiry would be fast, would be clear, would get its recommendations together quickly and allow the police process to take over. And there have always been excuses, but that isn't what that has been delivered to them. And, you know, even if the process of justice has been taking a long time, we haven't needed to wait as long as we have to work out how to evacuate other buildings, to put sprinklers in other social homes, and to get combustible materials off the walls of other people's homes as well.
And of course, there's also the evacuation tactics for disabled people as well. Things that they've been told they could do, that they could introduce after the first round of the inquiry, and that they have effectively elected not to. When did you personally feel that the pauses had become too long? Because I found this blog that you wrote, if that's the right word to use, I found it almost unbearably powerful. You list the things that we already knew about before the tower went up in flames. We knew about the fridge freezer with its combustible plastic backing. We knew about the kitchen window in flat 16 and everywhere else in the tower that due to the botched refurbishment. We knew about all of the gaps, the combustible plastic, the aluminium composite material. We knew about the foam insulation boards. All of this was known. Edward spoke earlier about what he now describes as a naive optimism in the immediate aftermath, standing in the shadow of the carcass of the building. and thinking, well, this is going to have to change now. And he described a dissipation of that optimism. When did your optimism start to dissipate?
I think that probably the first one for me was about 3 months after the fire. A local authority with similarly aged tower blocks had asked the government, not for money, but just to give them additional borrowing flexibility so that they could install sprinklers in their high-rise buildings. And the government wrote back to them and said, we believe that sprinklers are additional but not essential, and we don't think that it justifies additional borrowing. And that was in September 2017. And I think that was the last point at which I had any naivety, I think, about how seriously the state was going to take its response to this.
And I mean, the list is almost endless of things that could and should have been done. In addition to the sprinklers, the fixing the combustible facades, just being one example, internal fire safety defects, and oversight of them as well. I recommend everybody reads this piece, and I'll tell them how they can do that shortly. But how do you account for it? What is the reason behind something as obviously wrong as that government communication that you just described? Because that's of a piece with the much bigger picture, isn't it? What do you, if we made a list of the reasons why we think something so obviously unconscionable continues to happen in plain sight every day, and it's only on days like today that we give it the attention it deserves, what do you put at the top of that list for government inaction, for government lethargy, for government lack of concern?
I mean, that's a very good question. Again, I think over the last 7 years, Grenfell and the building safety crisis that has emerged since has never had top priority in the political debate. We've always been talking about Brexit, we've been talking about Ukraine, we've been talking about the pandemic, we've been talking about Partygate. And this thing that happened in West London, this kind of generationally unique disaster, has somehow just slipped away from our collective knowledge, our collective memory, and there has not been that kind of demand on politicians to put this at the top of the agenda, aside from people who are directly affected by it, either through having lost their homes and their children, or through having the misfortune of living in a building with similar safety issues. And I found that slightly baffling, but also I think sometimes there is a tendency to turn away from things that are too hard and that are too painful. And I think that, unfortunately, as a society and as a political class, that is something we've done from time to time with Grenfell.
Is there any grounds for optimism that a Labour government will perform better on this front? You've got the contacts, you have the conversations.
Well, look, I mean, I think the manifesto yesterday was very vague, but like you say, I have heard some things behind the scenes that have encouraged me. I think that they have spent actually quite a lot of time working out how they might do better on the building safety crisis, and the ideas are there. I think that the question is whether they're going to have the political ambition to implement those ideas. I think they know what they need to do. It won't be easy, but I do think they know what they need to do, and we'll see if they do win the election, if they are willing to do that. And
you'll be keeping a close eye on those proceedings. Ditto police proceedings, another line that jumps out from your article. The police investigation is progressing, but progressing so slowly that a 2-year-old boy carried sobbing out of Grenfell Tower may well attend the final trials, if we even get that far, as an adult. What do your instincts tell you? Because again, Edward spoke earlier about not having heard the clink of handcuffs yet. Do you think there will be trials?
Well, we had a briefing from the Met Police a couple of weeks ago. I think they have more than 50 individuals under active investigation for a range of offences, from fraud through to manslaughter. They spent an awful lot of money on that investigation. There's still a lot of detectives working on it, and even just from a cynical view of
needing a return on the investment, as it were. Yes.
So I think something will happen. I think it will take a very long time. It will take too long, and whether it will be the right people being prosecuted for the right things, I don't know. But I think that there will be some denouement in a criminal court somewhere, probably towards the end of this decade.
You're going to stay with this story for the rest of your career, are you?
Yeah, I had that realization, that 2-year-old boy will be a teenager and I'll probably be a man in my 50s. But
steady on. There's nothing wrong with being a man in your 50s, Peter. I would urge people to read your book, Show Me the Bodies, How We Let Grenfell Happen. In some ways, that second heading, that sub-heading, telling the story in the starkest terms. But how can people read your Substack as well?
I think if they just Google Pete Apps Substack, it should be the first thing that comes up. So yeah, but then thanks for giving that shout out, Joe.
No, well, thank you for writing what you've written, and thank you for your time today, Peter. Take care. Peter Apps there, journalist for Inside Housing, Substacker, and as I said, the author of Show Me the Bodies, How We Let Grenfell Happen. It's coming up to 12 noon. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I thought we'd probably have to stay with politics. There is quite an interesting story that's a bit sleazy, but I don't know that it's a phone-in topic. No, you don't think it's a phone-in topic either. No. So we'll stay with politics. I should probably do those sort of conversations off air, shouldn't I? I don't. It's too late now. I've been doing this for 20 years. Bad habits are baked in. All right, I'll level with you. There's a little bit of me that's thinking, are we sure that votes for 16 and 17-year-olds is a really good idea? And then, unfortunately, there's another little bit of me that's thinking, are you only thinking that because you're going to do some sort of weird manufactured controversy when in your heart of hearts you really do think that votes for 16 and 17-year-olds are a really good idea? After this. 4 minutes after 12 is the time, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where it's a change of pace now. I just want intelligent responses to a fairly straightforward question, and I don't necessarily want to have a ding-dong about it. I'd say something in a minute that may be ding-dongable, but the Labour Party looks like that 16-year-olds, it looks like if there is a Labour government, 16-year-olds will get the right to vote. I mean, as Peter Apps mentioned a moment ago in a completely different context, it's a fairly vague manifesto, but this is pretty clear. We will increase the engagement of young people in our vibrant democracy by giving 16 and 17-year-olds the right to vote in all elections. And that's obviously something that could be done very quickly and very, very effectively. So immediately, the world changes under a Labour government. They could do this in the first 100 days, couldn't they? They could just pass legislation, fairly straightforward legislation, to extend the franchise to people who will be 16 and over on the day of the first general election to follow the legislation. The thing I don't know, this is me being a bit weird, but you're used to it by now. The thing I don't know is whether or not this is, like, what's the word you use when all your policies? So you tell me what you think about immigration, and I can predict what you think about 10 other policies. Is there a word for it? Like, you have a kind of so it's not quite an Overton window. No, I'm thinking more of like a sack of policies, but there should be a fancy word for it, so that, you tell me what you think about Marcus Rashford, and I will calling for children to have dinners during the school holidays, and I will be able to work out what you think about Brexit. I don't know why that is, but a Venn diagram kind of, yeah, not an Overton window. That's better. That, like, a kind of, I know, you tell me what you think about X, and I will know with some confidence what you think about Y. Does this go into that category? If you tell me what you think about 16 and 17-year-olds getting the vote, will I be able to work out what you think about immigration and Brexit straight away? See, I think I will, but my younger colleagues think I won't. Not because they doubt my talents in this field, but because they don't think that your opinion on votes for 16-year-olds would be an indicator of your opinion on anything else. Crikey, Leo, that's a beautiful phrase. Leo's described it as a constellation of beliefs. Oh, I much prefer that. So you describe one star and I'll know what other stars you have in your constellation of beliefs. Mark Wilson calls it a policy support propensity. That's very nice. Oh, you're a clever bunch, aren't you? Honestly, here we go. What else have we got? Political compass. Yeah, it's kind of like that. A policy basket. That's what it is. David, I think I like the constellation of beliefs, but it's a little bit too poetic for psephology. Oh, that sounds posh as well. Associated ideology. Is it? I don't know that this is ideological, though. Is it votes for 16-year-olds? I don't know if it quite reaches into that. It's a policy basket. So you show me one thing in your policy basket. I'm having another one of those moments where I'm imagining that you've just turned the radio on and you're wondering what the hell he's talking about. Oh, show me what's in your policy basket. So you show me one thing in your policy basket and I'll be able to work out what all the other things are in your policy basket. And it's usually pretty... And now the grown-ups are turning up. There's too many of you. Predictive context, says Phil in Leamington. Determinism. Niall in Guildford calls it opinion clustering and signifiers. All right, I like opinion basket. I like policy basket. What's in your policy basket? So I don't know whether or not your thoughts on whether 16 and 17-year-olds should get the vote. I would have to stop saying and 17-year-olds just for the ease of communication. 16-year-olds getting the vote is necessarily something that would immediately highlight what your thoughts would be on other issues. I don't know. Anyway, that's very much a secondary consideration of this topic. The central question is, are we 100% sure that this is a good idea? If so, why? And if not, why not? Should I give you some if nots? I mean, you know the fellow who's facing people smuggling charges and sex trafficking charges in Romania. He's very popular with young people. Andrew Tate. He's very popular with young people. I mean, troublingly so. Some of the statistics that teachers have shared with me, and when we've sort of nibbled at the edges of this topic, have been chilling, very chilling. I think Farage has been boasting about young people following him on TikTok, which just sounds wrong, doesn't it, on every imaginable level. That's less. That's democratic engagement, I suppose. But equally, if you think that all 16-year-olds are likely to lean to the left, you may have a problem with the idea of them getting the vote. So I don't know. For sure that this is a good idea. The 16 and 17-year-olds that I know personally, and quite a lot actually, given my children's age and their social circles, I mean, some of them are better informed politically than Stephen Exeter, for example, who was on the programme in the last hour. Some of them are better informed politically. To be fair, I mean, most of us own furniture that might be better informed politically than some adults. But it is... So, look, here's a 52-year-old. You could talk to them about politics for 10 minutes and come away convinced that they shouldn't have the vote, right? Is a 16-year-old more likely in a 10-minute conversation to convince you that they shouldn't have the vote than a 52-year-old is or a 22-year-old is? I don't know. I genuinely don't know, and that's why I'm asking you. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. It's a manifesto proposal. It's free. I think this is quite an interesting thing to do when you're looking at what Keir Starmer and his colleagues are saying they will do when they come into Parliament. If they come in as a government, they can do stuff that's free. And they can do some quite significant stuff that's free. They can restore standards in Parliament. They can bring in much more robust punishments for politicians who break the rules, as opposed to certainly Boris Johnson's government, which seemed to be dedicated to protecting people who broke the rules from the consequences of their own rule breaking. So they can do stuff like that. This will be free. I don't know what happens in other countries, but if you do, we had a very international phone-in earlier this week where pretty much every call on the switchboard was from continental Europe. We're talking about the so-called surge of far-right parties in some of those Euro elections. But I don't know what the rules are in other countries. Do 16-year-olds have the vote in other countries? And what can we learn from that experience? What can we learn from the vote of 16-year-olds in other countries? Is there any reason to have less faith in a 16-year-old's ability to make an informed democratic decision than there is in a 25-year-old. It is 12 minutes after 12. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. I like this. It's a good old-fashioned phone-in, isn't it? We don't do many good old-fashioned phone-ins on this programme because I'm so annoying. I've been doing it for so long. I like to come up with clever questions that nobody else has ever asked you before, even if they're only very mild variations on questions you've been asked a million times. But what do we think of votes for 16-year-olds? Doesn't get much simpler than that. We'll probably do the death penalty on Monday if it carries on like this. What do we think about this? Why have I got misgivings, which I've never really felt before? Sometimes you like something in principle up to the point where it's about to become practice. There's just something that wasn't there last week. Now that it does look as if this is actually going to happen, if the polls stay the same, Labour make the next government, Keir Starmer introduces this relatively straightforward and cost-free manifesto pledge, 16-year-olds will have the vote. And do you know what it is? I'll tell you exactly what it is. It's change, isn't it? If it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of syndrome. Why do we want to twiddle with that? Why do we want to tweak that? But actually, the 16-year-olds and the 17-year-olds that I know would almost all make a pretty good case for letting them have the vote. Maybe that's what it depends on. Malta, I'm told, allows 16-year-olds to become mayors. Do you know that a 15-year-old can choose a prime minister? Here's a good little riddle for you. This is a pub quiz question. How could a 15-year-old choose an actual prime minister of the United Kingdom if a 16-year-old doesn't even have a vote in the general election? I like that. It's a proper riddle, isn't it? It's right up there with if my peacock laid an egg in your garden, who would it belong to? So how can a 15-year-old have a vote in selecting the next prime minister of the United Kingdom if a 16-year-old can't have a vote, doesn't have a vote in a general election? Do you know the answer to this? It's not quite as brilliant a question as it sounds, because when I tell you the answer to this, you'll go, oh, yeah, of course I'd never thought of that. Or you'll go, crikey, I didn't know that bit of that riddle. But obviously the second bit of that riddle is fairly obvious when you stop to think about it. So I only discovered this yesterday. 15-year-olds, a very specific sort of 15-year-old, can actually choose the next prime minister, and has, quite possibly in the last few years, chosen the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, despite the fact that 15-year-olds and indeed 16-year-olds don't have a vote in the general election. It's not the King, no, and it's not in the Youth Parliament. It's the real Prime Minister of the real United Kingdom, a country where 16-year-olds don't have the vote in elections, in general elections, but in which a 15-year-old can actually vote to select the next Prime Minister of the UK. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need for the broader conversation, and I shall give you the solution to my riddle after this. 16 minutes after 12. Well, I love it when things like this happen. So, Liberal Democrat politician Wendy Chamberlain is listening today. She says, I've been driving and listening in on your votes at 16. And she says, Peter Bottomley was one of the co-chairs of the Votes at 16 all-party parliamentary group in Parliament, along with myself and others from all parties. So maybe it's not a policy basket issue after all, which means Eleanor is right on this one and I am wrong. Because I felt, you tell me what you think about votes for 16-year-olds and I'll have a fairly good stab at telling you how you voted in the 2016 referendum. But I think I've probably got a little bit of Brexit derangement syndrome on that. And Wendy's intervention certainly steers us towards the conclusion that the producer called this one right and I called it wrong. I'm not going to forget to give you the reveal on that. You can be a member of the Conservative Party at the age of 15. And the Conservative Party, of course, the membership of the Conservative Party selects the next leader of the Conservative Party. And if the previous leader of the Conservative Party has resigned from that role while being Prime Minister and simultaneously resigned as Prime Minister, then the Conservative Party membership effectively select the next Prime Minister. And this is, of course, exactly what happened with Liz Truss. So I think it's just the Tories. I think that the other parties might have a slightly higher age limit, but they might not. It's been so long since anyone else was in power. But the Tory party membership, or party membership, broader party membership, would allow a teenager to choose a prime minister, even as they do not have a vote currently in a general election. But what do we think about the vote for 16-year-olds? James is in Scarborough to kick things off. James, what would you like to say?
Good afternoon, James. Yeah, a couple of points, really. First of all, I'm a youth worker, and my job is to kind of engage young people and set up youth councils and be kind of democratically involved. And my experience is young people actually have a lot to say, and when they are engaged, they have opinions that are of different and varying things and debate it, and to say things that we don't think about as services that make massive differences to the services that affect them. So just on that level, it's important. But secondly, I think it's damn cheeky to say that they can die for their country at 16. They can go out and pay.
Is that still true? Don't you need?
They're still going to join the army.
Yeah, I don't think you can do active duty until you're 17. That's a very, very silly hair for me to split, but I take your point. They could.
Yeah.
You can pay tax at 16.
Yeah, and but not have a say in, and the argument I often hear is, well, they're not engaged in, but if we don't have people that can cook, we teach them to cook, and actually the parties will have to engage, and I get fed up when people say, oh, these are the future, young people are future. They're not, they're here now, they're part of society.
I blame Whitney Houston. Wasn't it her who said that? I believe that children are the future, treat them well and let them show the way. Was it Whitney Houston?
Probably.
Yeah. Someone like that.
And it's the fact that they're kind of, when we look at political movements, we might have older people that are the drivers, but the engine tends to be,
so it's a no-brainer for you. It's a complete no-brainer for you. And if I were to present you with a 16-year-old drongo, you could respond quite reasonably by showing me a 52-year-old drongo.
Absolutely. I think young people at the moment, I've been doing youth for 25 years, at this moment are more engaged politically than I've ever seen in 25 years.
Why?
I think just from, when things, there's been movements, I think the internet has gathered people together. So we look at the flurry of movements like the Pride movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. As I say, there might be someone who's older in the driving seat, but the actual movement and the cultural kind of engagement around that tends to be young people that are providing that energy, providing the art, the music that goes alongside it, and really are the voice underneath of it all that sets the standard of what that kind of movement becomes.
And I mean, I hesitate to ask this question because it may change people's minds on the wisdom of allowing the 16-year-olds to vote. But would it be the case in your experience that they'd be more likely to lean towards the left at that age than towards the right?
I think it depends on what the parties are saying, because there's certain values that they hold in common, and I think it's more young people now are more just accepting, because we have come a long way of things, like the LGBTQ plus movement. They're more understanding. They respect people as individuals. So if the right wing party's saying that, then they are, the young people might be into the Conservatives, but against them demonising certain demographics. So they remove that, then young people will be voting for the right wing because those things make sense to them. Equally on the left,
a little bit less, a bit less prone to footballification at that age than you are when you're a little bit older. Perhaps your views don't ossify, or your loyalties rather don't ossify.
I think they have very much integrity in their beliefs, and they will match that with whatever party is engaging them within that, and just giving them attention. They're very much, the motto is, I'll respect you if you respect me. The party's engaging with them, even if it's a party that they wouldn't normally vote for, their mind's changed and they're more likely to listen.
I hear you. And it's not just Labour. Liberal Democrats, SNP, Plaid Cymru and the Greens have all unequivocally committed to granting full voting rights to 16 and 17-year-olds. So I suppose you could wonder, why wouldn't the Tories, which is why I asked James the question about whether or not they are, because that's certainly the perception, isn't it? The consensus is that they are more likely to lean towards the left than towards the right. Thank you, James. Great stuff. 22 minutes after 12 is the time. Actually, speaking of Plaid in the SNP, a lot of people in the first 2 hours of the programme, me included, in fact, I was the worst offender of all, talking about nobody's mentioning Brexit and somewhat lazily, I think, referring obliquely to the two main party leaders. Of course, plenty of people are talking about Brexit. SNP and Plaid Cymru politicians on the telly last night. I'm not being funny. I've just got paranoia syndrome, political paranoia syndrome. So I can say Stephen Flynn, can't I? And you can say that the leader of Plaid Cymru as well did talk about it. The Liberal Democrats have talked about it. There's plenty of politicians who have talked about it. So it was a misspeak by me at the top of throughout the programme really today to suggest that those conversations are not being had. And the Run App Uwth, Run App Uwth, the leader of Plaid Cymru. I saw him as well, raising some of these points last night. 23 after 12 is the time. Nathan is in Sittingbourne. Nathan, what would you like to say?
Afternoon, James. Thanks so much for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
You know what? I think there's only positives to come from this. I can't see it being anything but democratic to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote as they're entering that period of lives where they're transitioning into adulthood.
Yeah.
I know, for example, when I was 17, that was when the Brexit vote was happening, and I had a lot of schoolmates who would have loved to put in their vote for that referendum. And to be completely honest, I think the outcome would have completely changed if 16 and 17-year-olds... Would there have been enough
of you? Would there have been enough? I don't know how much it would have needed.
I don't know if the sort of outcome of the support of 16 and 17-year-olds in terms of numbers, but I do think in terms of their stance on it being Remain, it was overwhelming in my school at least. I can see the Conservatives and more the right-wing political parties sort of looking at this as or picking out certain laws that sort of 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds can't have. So for example, drinking.
Yeah.
I could imagine them going, well, they shouldn't be able to vote. They can't have a pint, when those things aren't sort of exclusive at all. I think it's really important to engage young people politically. I have a lot of friends that unfortunately aren't engaged politically, but then I've been brought up in a very political household, and all power to it. You know, now we're having conversations around the dinner table. You've got
skin in the game if you've got a vote.
Exactly.
In a way, haven't you?
Exactly.
So you've got skin in the game anyway. You've just got no influence over the game.
And now we're having conversations about the current general election with my 16-year-old brother, and obviously he can't vote, but even he is giving quite relevant ideas about sort of nationalising railways and things that he's hearing and seeing online that clearly matter to him.
It would be a nice little change of pace, wouldn't it? So you know, you're doing it if you're studying for your A-levels, politics will be part of quite a lot of courses, part of a history course, obviously part of a politics course, economics course, socio, and to feel, it may even give that franchise, it may give the vote a bit of a glossy coat, Nathan. It'll actually make it feel quite exciting. I got a lovely message the other day from someone talking about voting with their children at the last council elections for the first time, and they'd been quite apathetic about it until they got there, and once they were in the polling booth, that engagement with democracy in real time would be quite a special moment, and to have it at a national level as from that age, I'm with you. I can't really see a downside to it. For every 16-year-old you can show me who you think doesn't deserve the vote, I'll show you. I'll show you a Brexiter. 27 minutes after 12 is the time. That was cheeky. Naz is in Enfield. Naz, what would you like to say? Is anyone going to disagree with me today? We've got a complete unanimity so far.
No, I'm not going to disagree. I think that 16-year-olds should have the right to vote. From working in school before with 11 to 18-year-olds, 16-year-olds do want to engage and have a say. We have mock elections sometimes. Not sometimes, actually, every time there's an election, they have mock elections. So. Yeah. I think that 16-year-olds they do want to be involved, and they often think that people are just ignoring what they want to say. So give them the right to vote. They can do a lot of other things at 16, so give them the right to vote.
It's only 28 minutes after 12. Are we going to have another half an hour of people saying exactly the same thing, do you think, Naz?
Yeah, probably. I'm sorry, but that's
such a bloody
opinion.
Echo chamber, this show. I'm sick of it. It's because we cherry pick all our callers.
I'm so sorry.
It's all right. It's me. I'm the one that carries the cat. Who would be? Let's pretend we're against it. Why are we against it? Because we don't think they've had enough life experience yet to vote on issues. Is it?
Why would I don't see that it would be a negative. Yes, people would be against it, and I think the Tories would definitely be against it because they like to pander to older people, more right-wing ideas. But I think that. I think that other parties might be a bit more open to it, and maybe they'll do some policies that actually help the youth.
It puts the Tories in quite a tricky position of being the only party opposed to it, and you'd say, why? I said, well, we don't think they'll vote for us. And then you could say, well, be more attractive then.
Yeah. Well, it can. Well, it's your phone in, James.
Well, it is. It's not. It's all of our phone in, Naz. It's your phone in as much as it's mine, albeit that I get to talk more. It's coming up to 12:30. Sort of sensible reasons why you might not be in favour of this. Karen, you cheeky monkey. Karen's been in touch to say, tell us about the sleazy thing. I will tell you about the sleazy thing in a minute. The story that caught my eye because I thought it might be like a moral conundrum that we could talk about. And Tony said, quite sort of post-watershed language, Tony, if you don't mind me saying so. So what about the peacock egg? Well, that was a throwaway line about riddles, because if my peacock laid an egg in your garden, who would it belong to is a false question. Because peacocks don't lay eggs, Tony. That's peahens, you see. Amelia Cox has got your headlines. 12:32 is the time. You're torn between saying thank you for going back and trying to get the name of the leader of Plaid Cymru correct and being cross with me for completely butchering the pronunciation of his name. I don't have the Welsh, obviously, but I try. I really do, and I think, and thank you to Richard and others for trying to give me a kind of idiot's guide to pronunciation. I think if Reen ap Yorworth would have been a better crack of the whip. I think Reen ap Yorworth. But either way, I was just complimenting him on his performance last night in those in that seven-way conversation. 33 minutes after 12 is the time. Alex is in Derby. Alex, what do you think?
Good afternoon, James. So, as a young person, I'm 27 years of age at the moment. I had the chance to vote for the Brexit referendum in 2016. I was 19 years old. So it was really the first sort of position of voting power I was given as a young person in England. And to be honest with you...
Did you not vote in the 2015 election? Did it just miss you birthday-wise?
I just missed it birthday-wise. So my first opportunity to have my own say and, to try and gather my thoughts and be confident in the decision I make as an empowered young person I thought I was at the time. I actually voted to leave the European Union in 2016 because at the time I was a full-time carer at home for my two ill grandparents who were living both with dementia, relying on some extra funding for the NHS, which
the bus. We forget about the bus, don't we?
The bus and promise of, hope for the future and being a young person trying to shape my future, having seen my grandparents both suffer and commit their whole lives for the working people and being very proud of their work here in this country. And, although at 19 you don't really have the world's knowledge of history behind you and you certainly don't have a crystal ball to see the future. However, some hope and optimism was something I really relied upon. And, looking back at the age of 27 now, coming up to the general election, I really do feel disheartened that Brexit is so far removed from the front of the talking point after COVID and everything else.
You've steered us back there because we talked about it for the first 2 hours of the programme. But this isn't really just because you were young and callow and voted that you were misled by the lies of the leaders of the various Brexit campaigns. I don't think that's relevant to you being 19. I could show you in fact, you're much more likely to have voted for it if you were over 60.
True. And I think the thing is as well, though, because now the discussion of 16 and 17-year-olds being able to give the vote of power and why I'm concerned more over being 19 at the Brexit referendum is because there isn't a lot of education and understanding available for politics for people of a young age, certainly in the Midlands where I am.
But this is chicken and egg, isn't it? So we would get more if their vote was there. You'd seek it more. You'd demand more. Maybe even bring it into sixth form.
Change. Yeah. I think everybody's aspiring for a change. And as a young person wanting to, work and pay taxes and live my life in this country and being very proud to live here, but also having pride in, the international relations this country has, and, having grown a lot in the 8 years since the referendum. I think we just aspire for change, but giving the young people that power, it really makes me sit on the fence as to whether the information and the education is there for people to be able to make an informed vote, because yes, they can work, yes, they can earn and pay taxes, albeit probably less than most of us working on minimum wage.
Yes, of course.
But it really is a case of how do we support young people with their vote? Because the thing is, there is so much misinformation, and social media is such a driving
Why do you worry that a 17-year-old would be more susceptible to misinformation and fake news than a 65-year-old? I mean, just look at Donald Trump's support in America.
I think, though, the difference is it's an influence and an ideology that, living in a social media world, which I do, and being raised upon only in that world, I am respectful that there was an age prior to me who only managed to get their information from word of mouth and use press sources, and not to say that they're inaccurate or incorrect.
Just get them all to tune into this show, and we'll be golden.
But the thing is, James, I think, there is such an ease of misinformation available on social media. And
yes, there is, but I think I think we can politely disagree that would be more likely to sway a 17-year-old than a 70-year-old.
You would hope so, but
the Facebook stuff that Cambridge Analytica did was aimed very much at older demographics rather than younger. Is there not even an argument for younger people being a bit more savvy on their social media and knowing not to trust their TikToks or to take?
My hope would be that young people aren't brushed with that same tar, that they only get their ideas and their interests from that social media.
Exactly.
I completely agree with you, James, and I really hope to create that separation between people who are just set and comforted in their knowledge and their own ways, whether right or wrong.
Yes,
that young people are just presented with so much information.
That's true. No, this is a concern. Guidance. It's a valid concern, and you've raised it very well. Thank you. 12:37 is the time, and Sean O'Grady writes a very good piece actually on the Independent Premium website, and he makes this point which I hadn't thought of actually. Look at some of the things the Conservative have done, the last government has done, which some critics believe were designed to give them an unfair advantage and to suppress the vote for groups more likely to vote Labour. So they gave the vote to all expats forever. Presumably they think that an expat is more likely to lean towards the Tory party than not. That compulsory photographic ID they brought in, and there were different rules for young people. It was harder. There were fewer ways in which a young person could avail themselves of compulsory photographic ID than there were for older people. And again, the demographics speak to support for the Tories being more likely the older you are. The mayoral elections, where they moved from the preferential voting to the first past the post, which some people thought made the possibility of what's a chops getting in higher. What is her name? The woman who listens to this show constantly and tweets every few months saying she's tuned in by accident. Susan Hall. Did I tell you the Susan Hall story? I told you the Susan Hall story, didn't I? From when I said that bloke with that advisor, the one Richard Holden, who sort of soiled himself really on live television when being interviewed by John Craig, and I said, I bet he's getting advised by the person that ran Susan Hall's campaign. I said it as a joke. It turned out it was true. You've got that. You've got the mayoral campaign changes. Then you've got the reducing the independence of the Electoral Commission as well. So quite a lot of grounds for accusing the Conservatives of trying to manipulate the voting system. What percentage of voters in the 16 to 24-year-old category do you think polling suggests lean towards the Conservative Party, and what percentage do you think leans towards the Labour Party? The numbers are pretty tiny. So according to Redfield and Wilton, who've looked at this, Conservatives are on 8% among, this is 18 to 24-year-olds, but you'd expect it to extend, wouldn't you? Conservatives are on 8% and Labour is on 50%. So you could make a case for this being quite unconstitutional, actually. It's a kind of, I'm never quite sure what the word gerrymandering means, but it's a kind of manipulation of the system for their own ends. The Liberal Democrats are in favour of it and the Greens are in favour of it as well. I think Plaid and the SNP are in favour of it as well. I haven't got the figures for those, I'm afraid. Oh, yes, I have. 9% each for the Liberal Democrats and the Greens. So not that different from their national figure, but for the Labour Party versus the Conservative Party, it's gangbusters. So, what happens then if the Tories come in at the next election and decide to undo it again, to take it away from 16 and so? Do you say? So I don't know, but it's a very good piece. Sean O'Grady's a great writer, and this is a particularly thought-provoking piece he's written under the headline, Votes for 16 and 17-year-olds could be extended across Britain, but is it a good idea? James is in Merthyr Tydfil. Is it a good idea, James?
I believe it's not a good idea.
Go on.
So you can send a 18-year-old to war, but you can't send a 16-year-old to war. Yet,
but they can join the army. They can join the
army, but they're not physically allowed to go to war until they turn 18. So they can join the army, but they will not go to war. So my thing is, a 16-year-old can make a decision through an election and have an effect for an 18-year-old and above, and it will not affect them. So if we turn around and said, well, actually...
But that's true of pensioners.
But
pensioners have a vote in an election, and it's going to affect the workforce that they're no longer part of.
Yeah, that is true, but that pensioner has had their... They've given back to the society through...
I don't know that. I don't know that.
You'd like to think a pensioner...
Right, the 16 to 18-year-olds are about to make enormous contributions to the society, and you're telling them that they can't actually have a stake in it for 5 years. If you're 16 now...
2 years.
No, because there's 5 years between elections. So you heard the last lad, he just missed out on the 2015 election. He was 20 in 2020. No, he would have been... 2019, he'd have been 22, 23. So he had 4 or 5 years as a fully functioning adult, paying taxes and not ever having cast a vote.
True.
I can talk you out of this, James. I can hear it. I can hear it in your voice, mate. I can hear it in your voice.
I would stand true by saying, no, I don't believe that they should vote.
And the army point it's not really a clincher, is it?
It's not a clincher, but they can make a decision on someone's life that may have a negative impact. So unless they're within the bracket of that as well. So an 18-year-old can vote, can go to war. An 18-year-old can...
get married at 16. You can get. I think you still need your parents' permission, do you? You can't get married. You can't get married at 16, or can you? Why are you shaking your head at me?
Parents' permission, is it, or you can't? I don't know. It may have changed now.
Well, anyway, it's too late for us anyway. So no, it is. The minimum marriage age rose to 18 in England and Wales in February of 2022. Well, you live and learn, don't you? Hey, no one told me. What if you got married by accident? Thank you, James. Chris is in Tower Hamlets. Chris, what would you like to say?
Good afternoon, James.
Hello, Chris.
I'm hugely in favour of it. It's long overdue. The most important problem that we face as a country, and we're not alone in this, of course, is voter apathy.
Yes.
I mean, the turnout in elections, for a democracy is just simply appalling. And, listening to your station as I do a great deal, as you know, I mean, I'm just appalled by the number of people who come on regularly and say, I'm not involved in politics. I'm not.
Yeah, but they are. Don't be appalled. They just don't realise. They mean party politics. They find PMQs alienating, but obviously they care about things like the NHS and schools. So you were a head teacher.
They do, James. Yes. No, sorry, James. No, they do. But the point is, they need educating into understanding that is politics. They do think that politics is some kind of game played in Parliament. As soon as you start talking to them about, street lighting and potholes and the NHS and
they become very animated.
They become very interested. And the point I wanted to really make was that once you pass this legislation and it becomes law, then you automatically have to change the school curriculum so that there is a constant focus on preparing young people for their responsibilities as citizens in a democracy. Nothing to do with party politics. You need to explain to them exactly how important it is and the impact it has on their lives from day one.
I like this. And you were a head teacher, of course, so you've dealt with sixth formers. You don't, I imagine, given how robust your views are already on this, your experiences haven't led you to think that they might lack some of the clarity that older people lack. That's the argument, isn't it, really? You can say, well, I know a 16-year-old who shouldn't have the vote, and you could respond to that with, I know a 60-year-old who shouldn't have the vote. It doesn't know it doesn't know its backside from his elbow.
No, absolutely. No, I have huge confidence in them being able to do it. And the point has been made quite early on in your conversation today that, of course, even when you've changed this legislation, the vast majority of people who vote as a result of that will not be 16. They'll be 17 or 18 or 19 or 20 or 21 because elections tend to come around normally, every 4 or 5 years.
And that is it. So they are going to, and that kills off the argument, well, why not 15-year-olds? Why not 14-year-olds? Because the 16-year-old is already your majority in so many other areas of life. But not in this one, although it turns out you can't get married. Who knew that? Did you know that, Chris?
Yes, I did.
Oh, clever clogs. It's 12:46. 49 minutes after 12 is the time. You can, I think, still get married at 16 in Scotland. So would that be a Gretna Green thing then? Would that bring Gretna Green back into fashion? I don't know why I said it in that accent. I apologise. It was pathetic. Gretna Green? Would it? So you could... I don't know. Full disclosure this week is Helen Lederer, who, as you well know, is a comedian and writer who has... Oh, she's done it all, really. And yet her new book it kind of starts on the premise or explores the idea that she hasn't had all of the... breaks that she would have, well, I think probably it's fair to say that she would have got if she was a man. I really, really, really enjoyed talking to her, and I really, really enjoyed her book as well. And here's a little flavour of our interview together.
I remember doing a David Frost sketch, and that was like my heavenly best moment, age 10. Like, everyone was laughing. I was obviously David Frost. The other people got to be guests, and because I was so inspired by that was the week that whole thing. And then it took a long time, like 50 years, before I felt that I was chiming that same thing. So I never kind of had that feeling again.
Really?
Till I wrote the novel. And then I thought, my creation is making people laugh. That's amazing. But I had to do all those other things in between times. But the point is, James, when did you get to be a presenter and do what you want? I mean, you have to do other things. It's not a crime, is it?
That's a long stretch, though, between moments of fulfillment. Douglas Adams called it throwing yourself at the floor and missing, like that magical, transcendent feeling of Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, you're on your journey and you're close to it at times. But the actual bliss of, bliss is very rare, and rightly so. Otherwise, we'd all be euphoric, wouldn't we, all the time?
But you also make it sound a bit like crack cocaine. You make it sound a bit like that first high. You then spend the rest of your life chasing it. But
yeah, I remember the high.
And was it the laughter of other people? Was it the approval, the laughter? What was it that was so intoxicating?
It was the fact that what I was doing caused that.
Yes.
And then that, in turn, meant that to me. So it's a transaction. It's not a kind of individual. It's the two together.
Yeah.
When
like
it's
alchemy,
right.
in a way.
It's totally that. It's like, and that's why when I do these events now, and they're just never going to be repeated, the excitement, as long as you haven't got someone scowling at you in your eye line, the excitement of creating a kind of happening that will never be repeated, that was just us. To me, that's really what I'm about at the moment.
In the room.
It's what I can manage.
That's nice. $12.51 is the time. Full disclosure, of course, available wherever. Well, no, get it from the Global Player, where you can download all my radio shows as well. Loads and loads of stuff there. The novel she referred to is Losing It, which I think came out in 2015. But the memoir that she's written is called Not That I'm Bitter. And it's out now. It's a real joy, and she's a fantastic woman. Do you know? I think we've done quite well lately on Full Disclosure to swing against the imbalance of men. For a while, we were interviewing too many men and not enough women. We've done quite well on that lately, because as I was listening back to that, and I recorded that with Helen a while ago, I remembered that I recorded a new Full Disclosure this week with Sally Lindsay. I don't know if you heard her ring in last week when we were talking about, I think, class and the arts. And Sally, a hugely powerful advocate for both greater representation of both women and people with working class backgrounds in culture, in the arts. Currently, of course, the modern Madame Blanc mysteries on Channel 5, but also she came up with formats, came up with ideas. What's Scott and Bailey, the one that ended up with Saran Jones and Leslie Manville doing it, Leslie Sharp doing it, because Sally was pregnant when the TV company decided to commission the show. It was a really, really good conversation as well. But she said what Helen said. She said that it was when she got her first main lead role at university, that at Hull University, that was the biggest high she's ever had. Nothing since. Even when she got her gig in Coronation Street, even when Madame Blanc got commissioned, even when Mount Pleasant, which was also her idea. I find that fascinating. I find that really fascinating. The idea of career being a bit like what drug addicts often say about drugs, is that you never quite have a high as big as the first one. And I was trying to think what mine was, and I actually think that I can. It wasn't broadcasting. It wasn't my first byline in a newspaper, but the editor of the Sunday Express, for very odd reasons, asked me one week if I wanted to write a column about pop music in the Sunday Express. And I don't know what I'd done to give her the impression that I knew anything about pop music, because I didn't. This was before I was showbiz editor. And I said yes. I bit her arm off. And I wrote a column about pop music. And I didn't know what they were going to do with it. So on a newspaper, you send your copy into a computer. You don't know what's going to end up in the paper. So I once wrote a 2,000-word interview with somebody, and it ended up as a nib. It ended up as a 2-paragraph story on the side of a page. You never really knew. And if you don't hang around until the proofs come back, you're never going to see it. And sometimes, even if the proofs come back, the second edition, or it'll get dropped after you've gone home. So I didn't know what they were going to do with it. And then it was about a Friday afternoon, and the lovely woman on the picture desk came and said, "We need to take your picture for Sunday's paper." And I said, "Oh, this is interesting." And what for? She said, "Your column." I thought, "What do you mean, my column?" So I had my picture taken, and I was out with my mate in Soho. And I can even remember where we went. We went to that. What's the cheap place? Is it Polo, just down by Cambridge Circus? Yeah, and you could buy the first editions on. So you probably still can. You could get the first editions of the newspapers at about midnight at the railway stations in London at the time. This is going back 20 odd years. And so I went and bought the Sunday Express. I opened it, and they'd given me a whole page with my name across the top and my photograph on the. And I think that I was trying to think after speaking to Sally this week, and then remembering what Helen said in that interview, whether I'd had a moment like that, which just nothing ever felt quite that magical again, because it was the very, very first time. It's the very first time. I don't imagine you were remotely interested in that story, were you? But I'm glad I got it off my chest.
I was.
Thank you, She.
I was trying to think what my version of that was, and I can't work it out.
Oh, you've got 3 hours.
I think I've been very lucky. I've had a lot of them.
Yeah, but there's got to be one that was first. That's the point. Well, you've got 3 hours to think.
Leave it with me.
Etty's in Kentish Town. To steer us back to votes for 16-year-olds, Etty, what would you like to say?
I'm going to disagree with most people. I don't think 16 and 17-year-olds should have the vote. I don't dispute any of what most people have said, but I think the mind of a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old is still maturing, and in some ways sort of needs protection. And so when people are sort of engaging in, some people spoke about the mock elections or whatever, I think 16 and 17-year-olds are still learning. We require them to stay in full-time education until they're 18. We treat 18 as the age of majority for so many other things where I think 16 and 17-year-olds can sort of get manipulated or exploited. And that is because
And in fact, I think they've done, the far right parties did quite well in this demographic in some of those European elections this week.
Yeah, I was listening to the show earlier this week, and they said a lot of the.
They thought it was cool, didn't they?
AFD.
They thought it was almost cool to vote for the AFD for the which has its roots in the Nazi
and young
party.
people, they might think they're more savvy about social media or whatever because they've grown up with it. That doesn't actually mean that they're better able to spot when someone's trying to manipulate them or spin them a yarn. And that could be the case for a 50-year-old. But if it's for a 50-year-old, that's because they're stupid. Whereas if it's for a 16-year-old, that's because they're still learning.
So, do you know, that's the last call of the week for me, Etty. And it's going to ring in my ears all the way to Dublin, where I'm going to the Dorky Book Festival this weekend. Thank you for that. If you're 50 years old, it's because you're stupid. But if you're 16, it's because you haven't got the ducks in a row yet. This is just for Karen, who thought I'd forgotten. Karen begged me for some sleaze earlier after I suggested that there was a story in the newspapers that might make a phone in but was probably too sleazy. So I'll just read you the first paragraph of it. An unfaithful husband who arranged meetings with prostitutes via messages on his iPhone is pursuing legal action against Apple after his wife discovered that his deleted messages were still stored on a linked computer. I can't say there's a lesson there for all of us.
Speaking of stupid.
Speaking of stupid, yes. I feel very sorry for her. More sorry than I do much sorrier for her than I do for him. If you don't want to get busted for contacting prostitutes, here's my advice to you. Don't contact prostitutes. There it is. It's coming up to 12:59. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, the official LBC app, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty. 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 Now it's time